allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You ready for report?
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you ever get a chance to go to the website, Officer Down Memorial, gives very good information. So far, in 2019, 23 officers have been killed in less than 3 months. In 2018, the total was 151. U.S. servicemen, we have lost 52. The last 4 years, 2015 through 18, we have so far lost 3 to date for 2019. 3 too many, but improving number. Thanks to your help on the Vietnam Veteran War Fund, we have raised $1,000, and I think we're just getting warmed up. The Oregon Veteran Vietnam War Memorial at the state capitol. If you ever get a chance to see the World War II in the West Lawn, it is just fabulous. Also, as you know, we lost Dennis Richardson 10 days ago, and last Thursday we lost Norma Paulus, who was a tremendous Oregon leader. She was the first woman ever elected to an Oregon state office. So I would like to have a moment of silence for her, if we could, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I didn't get to take Dennis Richards upriver, but I did her, and she's
Okay.
great person.
I want to do something a little bit out of order this morning before we get on with the agenda. I want to talk to you all while you're here and sharp and paying attention about something called Test It. Basically, we're going to have our new census coming up. And if you want your voices to be heard throughout Curry County, throughout Oregon and rural counties, that we can get the funding that we need to have an absolute voice in our federal and state government, I would like you all to look into downloading this app. If you'll just Google Test It app, it will come up on your computer. TESTIT, and then search it on Google as Test It app and download it on iPhone or Android. What this is going to do is it does 2 things. First, if Verizon or one of these companies comes in and says that Oregon has 4G, if one small spot in Curry County shows 4G, they can advertise that Curry County is complete with 4G, when we're not, and we know we're not if you live in rural areas. So what this does is every time, once you download this, it's a little app, you just push it. It's all you have to do. It doesn't get into your personal information. It doesn't access any of your contacts. Nothing like that.
You're sure about that?
Yes, I'm sure. At least that's what they say. All it does is send a signal to NACO, which is the National Association of Counties. They have a server that is dedicated to this. It sends the speed of your broadband where you're standing at that point. And what it does is it's going to hold. Rural Oregon needs broadband. We need broadband throughout. As we know, our law enforcement has had issues, is still having serious issues with repeaters and being able to contact deputies in the field. And a lot of this is the failure in our broadband systems. So if everyone here was to download this and consistently, maybe once every couple of weeks, just push the button, you'll see, first of all, exactly what the speed is at wherever you're standing of the broadband. And secondly, this will notify Washington and all the organizations necessary. What they're going to start doing is holding all the broadband providers. They're going to take them to task. If they're saying they're 4G throughout Oregon, they're going to make them provide 4G service throughout Oregon. So the other thing this will do is where you are standing, when you press this button, is where you live, basically. It's where you're spending your time. For the 2020 census, it's $2,316 per family in Oregon in federal and state funding for the state and counties to be able to pay our bills. So The question arises on this: if you have a child or a grandchild away at college or in the military, you know, and they're not in the state when you push the button to be counted as an Oregonian, that's just part of doing business. You know, your family member is away, so yes, they're going to be counted away from your house. In other words, because they're in Alabama in college, they cannot be counted as an Oregon resident at that time because they're not an Oregon resident at that time. But what this app also does is it provides proof of people that live in this state, that actually live here, for voting rights and for funding through the state and federal government for Oregon. So again, it's just a real simple thing. I've done it on both my phones. It takes 30 seconds to download it. Just Google Test It app, and it'll come up on, you can click on one for Google Play and one for the App Store, iPhone App Store, and download it, and it'll be in your phone, and you can test it as many times as you'd like to. Yes.
Just emphasizing, the better the data, the more accurate information, the better chances are that rural areas especially get that funding.
And that's exactly why NACO is pressing this. It is for rural Oregon. This isn't for the big, you know, we know the people live in the big cities. Rural Oregon needs a voice. We need to know that when we speak in Washington, when we speak in our state capitals, that we are heard. And we are actually, I'm not going to go into other things, but we're actually looking to form Rural Oregon Coalition so that a group of counties come together and we become a larger voice for rural Oregonians. So thank you for your time on that, and I'd like to thank the board for letting me kind of go off track on that a little bit. So do we have any amendments to the agenda?
I have a couple.
Okay.
I'd like to take from the consent agenda L and M, just for discussion purposes only.
Okay, and you want to put them up under C?
Yeah, right, either right before the consent agenda or
Okay, yeah, that's
right
what we'll
after.
do.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Boyce?
Those two are coincidentally the two that I was also going to pull for discussion. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
Oop, I'm sorry, roll call. I'm sorry. JJ, I'm sorry. We changed it.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, next we're going to do public comments. I see one here as a public comment, David Barnes.
Good morning, I'm David Barnes. Like so many others, I want to see Curry navigate its way through these difficult and trying times. And like them, I dedicate my efforts towards this universal goal. I've always found that a positive we-can-do-it attitude and a projection of a positive public image are critical factors in any successful endeavor. So I was shocked to see a recent article on the statewide highly viewed Oregonian website where one of my elected officials was quoted, "We've been hit so damn hard, no county in the state's even been hit close to us," and then crying out in despair, "We've got to have help." Yes, we have many pressing issues. 11 were listed, but commissioners, we elected you to be our help, not to advertise our difficulties for all to see. Solutions don't happen overnight. You have to work on them. You have an amazing, experienced, deeply dedicated staff, and to quote the Chetco Ideas to Action plan, the community is highly independent and accustomed to solving its issues and challenges using local expertise and initiative. Are things here in Curry so irresolvable that after only 2 months you're throwing in the towel and have to cry out for help? And who are you inviting to help? The state? That would be called a takeover. I've seen them. We don't want one. Confidence and leadership is required for investment in any public project, and it's instilled by promotion of a positive public image and message. Negativity just undermines it, and it's doing that to the confidence in this body. If I didn't know the many charms of Curry, right now I'd be highly discouraged from moving my family or business here after reading these comments. At your last meeting, this board made March Civility Month. Civility is defined as politeness, courtesy, and respect. In honor of that, even though you passed this to proclaim civility towards each other, I ask you to extend that treatment to Curry County herself and act with politeness, courtesy, and respect. I ask you to accentuate her positives, like the Gold Beach Main Street project, and not denigrate, degrade, and disrespect her in the press and elsewhere. Like the old saying goes, if you don't have anything nice to say, keep your mouth shut. In the past, I've repeatedly called for resignation of do-nothing commissioners. In retrospect, I see this was wrong. Doing nothing is far better than falling into despair, being negative, and causing harm like is done by these comments. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Just a quick comment. Yeah, I was, that's yours truly, and I was substantially misquoted. I took a risk to bring good attention to this county and to identify the problems that we're faced with and how we could find assistance. So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Barnes.
You know, I'm reminded of an old line from the first Godfather movie, where Vito Corleone looks at his son Santino and says, "You never tell people outside the family what you're thinking." These are our problems. You know, why are we crying to other people to come and help us?
Is the highway our problem only? Is sudden oak death our problem only? Is wolf attacks, the first one in the coast of Oregon,
You don't know
only our
that for a
problem?
fact yet, sir. That's still called
I'm
probable.
sorry?
I believe that last I checked, that was still a probable. That wasn't confirmed yet. So,
Okay.
you know,
You'll be the first to know when we are able to confirm that.
Thank
you. And there's a bigger list beyond that, as you know. Yeah.
I've read it all.
Okay.
So moving on to the next public comment, it'll be on Caring Community Health, because most of these are on the land swap, and I'm going to kind of address that as one group if we can. So Connie Hunter, this is on Curry Community Health.
Hi, I'm Connie Hunter. I live in South Curry County, and Curry Community Health, I chair their mental health or behavioral health addictions advisory board. We're looking for volunteers, more volunteers to sit on that board. We do a great job in terms of putting together all the goals and objectives for the organization, and I have to tell you, when I first started working with Curry Community Health as a citizen, and a citizen-driven initiative was to address suicide among our veterans. And we convened a Veteran Suicide Awareness Town Hall meeting, and Curry Community Health came out. That was the first time that I really got to meet Ken Duque, Aaron Porter, and Mary Trost. And what I learned in that experience that we started to address and look at square in the eye, that we had the highest suicide rate in the state among our veterans, but we also had that among our seniors and our youth. From that point on, they asked me at some point to be on the advisory board, and just they put up with me for a long time, and I've learned a lot along the way, and I know they're going to give a great presentation, but just remember the other piece of the puzzle that we do as citizens to work with this great effort to provide mental health for our citizens is to participate in that advisory board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connie.
I'd like to reiterate, I mean, it takes people willing to give some of their time and their effort to make a county stronger. And anyone that would have a mind to do it, I would encourage people to get more involved in the advisory boards and the councils and the different organizations that we need to have throughout our country or throughout our county, so that again we have a voice when it comes time to make decisions. You're part of the process. You become part of the process, and it's one of the reasons that the board is going to start doing evening meetings to bring different people, a different sect of the county into our into our government meetings and education. We just want to reach out to everyone and let you know we'd ask you for your help in some of these councils and committees and boards. Thank you. All right, so I think I'd like to do the land swap public comments ahead of waiting for the actual action item. We have received, at least I have, and I think I've spoken to JJ and Ms. Schmelzer about the emails. We've gotten a lot of emails on this issue. I don't know if everyone here would like to have a 3-minute voice, or if you'd like to just defer to someone that's going to make similar comments to your comments. I don't want to stop anyone from speaking what they'd like to say about this. However, if someone in front of you has said exactly what you'd like to say, I would humbly ask you to defer, so we can move along. So first we have Gary Garman. Morning, sir.
Morning, Chair. Morning, Commissioners. I'm Gary Garman. I'm a resident at Flores Lake. Retired there 10 years ago and have been visiting for 30. I don't have a lot to say about the ecological value of that area. I think there are others who will speak much more eloquently and knowledgeably to that issue. This matter, in some form or another, has been coming up now for many, many years. And I'm thrilled that we have an item on your agenda that speaks to actually taking some affirmative steps to allow the county to do something with that property that's consistent with the wants of the locals, as well as providing the county with some property that I think is much more suitable for any kind of development that they might be interested in doing. For those of you who don't know that property, I've walked on that property. There are one or two others in this room who have walked that property. It is not developable. You just have to trust me. It is brutally, wonderfully natural in its own way. It's up and down. There are wetlands throughout. The timber there, you can tell the good timber was taken out decades ago. I can see that why this keeps coming up. I understand that new commissioners have to be educated to some degree on what that property is all about and what can be done with it. Just to get to the property, if the county was required to put in a road, will cost in excess of $650,000 just to get to the east side of that property. The development cost would be unbelievably high. So I think it's important that they factor that in as well. This reminds me a little bit, without taking into account the nature of that property and the beautifulness of a sort of a Florida land swap deal. It keeps coming up because it sounds attractive, but it has no real value from the standpoint of developing it into an economic producing kind of properties. It does have incredible value for its natural beauty, and I'm just really happy that this item is on your agenda. I hope you take the steps to make the swap. It's a good beginning to what we hope will be a process that will eventually solidify the fact that that property is going to be used in the way that we feel it consistently should be used, and finally take this off your agenda so we don't have to keep revisiting decade after decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Bradbury? Zoe Bradbury.
Thank you very much. I'm Zoe Bradbury. I live in Langlois. I was born and raised there, and my mom and sister and I run Valley Flora Farm up Flores Creek, where we grow mixed produce and fruit for our local community. As a native, I've been going to Flores Lake since I was a little girl, and I did have the opportunity when I was 16 to leave this area and go off to college and live in many other parts of the world, and came back after 15 years for the very specific reason that I realized in being away that there was no place like Curry County and like home. And I think a big part of that, and that epiphany for me, was recognizing that so many other places in Oregon and further afield have come under increasing development pressure, and the landscape that you see is so fraught with strip malls and ticky-tacky hotels and coastline development. And when you come home after 39 years of living here, it hasn't changed that much in my little sphere of reality, and that's something I'm so deeply grateful for. And I just want to say, I know everyone's going to speak to the specifics of this land swap. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I think that there's so much economic value in recognizing that one of our main assets here in Curry County is maintaining these landscapes as they are. People are not coming here on vacation because they want a Best Western on the lakes and the shore of Flores Lake. They're coming here because they want to see that wildness. They want to be in a place that doesn't look anything like where they just escaped from. So please recognize that. in every decision you make as you set forth on development goals for our county, but also specifically on this issue today. I can't encourage you enough to move forward with the swap. I was part of the roundtable that happened in 2017, and our community showed up by the hundreds, unanimously voicing support for that land to be taken off the table for development and being included in the parks. So thank you for considering it, and I hope we can get there today.
Thank you, Ms. Bradbury. Bob Morrow. Morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Bob Morrow, property owner and resident in Langlois, Oregon. Thank you for your honest consideration today of how to proceed with the Flores Lake property. The debate on how Curry County can best monetize the property has been going on for more than a decade, and it's wonderful to see that you are on the cusp of a decision. It is my hope that you decide in favor of Alternative 2 presented by Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Given the constraints that all stakeholders have in this deal, it is a wonderful compromise where all parties will benefit. The state receives an expansion of the Forest Lake natural area while preserving the aesthetic integrity of 2 inlets. The citizens' wish for preservation of the natural beauty on the south shore of Forest Lake moves closer, while the county obtains a property that offers multiple options to generate a source of income that will be consistent and regular for the county. Alternative 2 would preserve most of the South Shore Greenbelt vista as viewed from the North Coast shore. And that's what keeps the tourists returning to Flores Lake year after year. And tourists are the lifeblood of many businesses in the North County. Now, these are fundamentally sound reasons for you to approve the land swap Alternative 2. In April 2017, Commissioner Boyce witnessed nearly 200 citizens and students from Pacific High School speak in one voice calling for passive recreation and preservation of the natural resources of this special place. I want to thank you, sir, for attending. It was important to us. On September 27, 2017, the Curry County Board of Commissioners heard Director Johnson's report on Forest Lake and pursued evaluating development, logging, conservation, and recreation options. They've all been looked into in detail by professionals, and the results of all that effort has led us to the land swap proposal before you. Back in 2007, Curry County commissioned the Irwin Report, also known as the Cape Blanco Airport Area Economic Development Feasibility Study. This comprehensive 90-page study determined that a land swap of county property was a viable option a decade ago. The Irwin Report went on to declare the region's natural beauty and associated assets has a potential return well beyond that of development. Take that in. And that tourism is now the world's largest industry, with nature tourism the fastest growing segment. Alternative 2 would take the steps identified in the Irwin Report over a decade ago. Consider Yosemite Valley as a comparable in that vision. This land swap will begin a process that will be lauded for its vision, preserving the South Shore of Flores Lake, generating a regular income for Curry County, and enhancing tourism that North County businesses rely on. Alternative 2 will do all of this and more, providing positive benefits to all stakeholders. Alternative 2 should be approved by you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich Folden. Good morning, sir.
Hi, Rich Holden, Port Orford. I've only lived in this area 5-6 years now, but I've hiked and run my dogs in Flores Lake and hiked the shore several times. I think it's beautiful. I could be more informed about this issue probably, but my impression is that this is a fairly plainly a win-win kind of deal, a fair and prudent exchange for the state and the county. And I'm convinced that it is the land swap is something that the local residents who have the highest stake in this issue are all for, and I urge you to go forward with the land swap. from what I understand, this alternative 2 seems preferable. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Palmer. Morning, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you. I'm Tim Palmer. I'd like to encourage you to act on either one of these options for basically 3 reasons. There's overwhelming public support for it. It's an issue that has troubled us for years, and this is our best chance to resolve it, and it's a good deal for Curry County. So thank you, and also wondered if we might hear your discussion of this issue after the public comments are done here, rather than waiting for it to surface in the agenda as is.
I want to say we've got other presentations that are ahead of you that are people that have come here and are waiting, law enforcement, some other people in the hallway.
Okay, pardon me.
So I'd appreciate it. We're going to have to be a little patient. Thank you. Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Palmer, sorry, I think we just overlooked that we could have moved that forward on the agenda. I didn't think of it. I wish I had, considering the number of people that drove here from Port Orford, North County. So
I will say, though, other than the the presentations, I think we can get to this pretty quickly. So it's not like we're going to be here all morning on it, I don't believe. Mr. Rogers? Morning, sir.
Good morning.
The legend. That was a compliment.
Oh, okay.
Why would I have to clarify that?
Why are you blushing?
Well, I'm sincere as I could be.
I'm Jim Rogers, and I've been a forester in Curry County for over 50 years. I was on the County Natural Resources Committee that went out to assess the land almost 10 years ago. Like the appraiser says, it's not good for land or for timber, and it's not good for development because all of the wetlands and other problems with road access. So I think moving ahead with this land swap is the best thing for Curry County.
Sir, I have one question because you are a forester. The land that's there, the trees that are on the other land that we're looking to swap for, have you assessed that for the viability of those trees to a mill and the value of those trees at all, in your opinion?
I really haven't spent much time in that piece, so I'd rather not discuss it until I've spent a day or two in there.
Okay. No, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce?
If we do this swap, I can't imagine the circumstances we would actually harvest timber there that close to the highway and also that close to the high school. I mean, it's a beautiful section. It's flat ground. It is very dense, danger level there, but quite a variety of evergreens, tremendous variety. But yeah, I haven't walked it lately, so.
Yeah, I've walked the boundaries of it, but
yeah,
not the
it's pretty thick in there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mary Whale?
Wall.
I'm sorry, Mary. They slaughter my name too.
Thank you. I'm Mary Wall, and I'm from a ranch family in the Langlois area. My siblings and I are the 4th generation of our family to own and manage 2 sheep ranches in the north part of the county. I've participated in meetings, discussions, workshops on this issue for several years and have hiked and toured both the state natural area and the area you're considering today. My family values this area and has used it for years, including my niece's cross-country practices and races in the state natural area. And I'm here to request that you make the land swap. The community couldn't be clearer, I think, about its preference for passive recreation and conservation for this area. Every time this issue comes up, and as you've heard, it comes up a lot, the community expresses the same preference, which is a strong preference for conservation and recreation. The experts couldn't be clearer either. Every consultant, expert, and land appraiser who's looked at this for us has ended up at the same conclusion. It's not feasible to build roads in the area, the timber values are low, and the best use is for conservation and recreation. My personal preference is for alternative 2 because it would address a larger area, a larger part of this area that we're talking about. It makes sense for recreation and conservation purposes. It moves us further down the road to resolution so the county and the community could move on to other issues and benefit from the natural resources at Flores Lake. The land swap of 70 acres and easement on 90 acres gives us all more result for the time, thought, and money that the county and the community have invested over the years. Making this a conservation and recreation area supports the scenic values that drive up property tax revenue in the area. It supports the kayak restaurant, grocery store, B&B, and other related businesses, and it would be a great economic boost. The lack of access and low timber value make this a perfect place for passive recreation and conservation. The community wants this solution. It meets interests the county considers priorities, and it moves us forward. I hope you will approve this land swap. Thanks.
Thanks. Before we go on any further, I'd like to ask, is there anyone here that is against the land swap? Okay, and one more question. Of you that have read the choices, how many of you would prefer A over B? Raise your hands, please.
1 and 2.
1 and 2, I'm sorry. 2? How many prefer 2? Raise your hands. Overwhelmingly. Okay, thank you.
Good call.
Ann Vaselis?
Hello, my name is Ann Valisis, and I'm here.
Valisis, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You'll get to know us. Actually, hope you don't get to know us that well. Hopefully, we'll get to resolution today, right? Or soon. I'm here representing the Kalmiopsis Audubon Society. Our group has more than 380 members throughout Curry County, and we strongly urge you to move ahead with the land swap that State Parks has provided. I think this would not only be a win-win, but a win-win-win. I think it would be great for the county because the county would get a piece of land that it could use readily on Highway 101. It would be good for state parks because they would get a buffer to the Flores Lake Natural Area and kind of enhance scenery, and the community would get a big win because it's something people, as you've heard, have just been asking for and wanting for so long. We've been telling our local government that this is what people want, and so getting resolution and getting the value of that would be a wonderful win as well, in terms of building trust as well as the local economy, as people have mentioned. I want to just say specifically that the appraisal conducted by an independent and unbiased appraiser, which I think Commissioner Boyce, who said you knew this guy for a long time and he's been around for decades, he confirmed that the property, the county property under consideration, has no road access and no timber value. The appraiser went through these things pretty systematically, and some specific language from that appraisal is accessing the property from the east is not practical as the route would require crossing significant wetlands with new road construction. In summary, it's economically unfeasible. Mostly marginal timber, very poor site for growing timber. Those are just a few things. There's more, but they confirm what local citizens have said for years and also what the county staff has found when doing research on this when it has come up through all these years. So I think, having that unbiased person now look at the situation and bring this forward, I think is important to recognize. Moving forward with the proposed land swap, I think is a very practical action that would finally allow the county to, instead of kind of waiting on this and wrestling with this and being kind of in conflict with many local citizens, to move forward and really provide something of practical value that we could benefit from. The lands currently that the state owns, some ideas for what the county might do with these include, and these are the lands on Highway 101, making it an anchor to develop a county forest, considering harvesting timber, using it for communications, perhaps disaster preparedness is an idea that's been put out, possibly a county campground or some purpose related to the high school or sheriff's use. So those are just a bunch of ideas that people have put forward. And I just want to say it's important to recognize, I sent you guys a letter that had all a list of background timeline. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but to recognize that many options have been considered systematically through the years, but none of them have proven economically feasible. I included the list, but there's just lots of things I can think of that aren't even on that list. When the Real Property Task Force met At that time, the county parks staff looked at it and said, could we expand our county park? I know I was recently talking to somebody who works in Oregon tourism, and they said, oh yeah, we sent out a bike, we're trying to plan a mountain bike destination in Curry County. We sent somebody out to look around there to see if that was feasible. It didn't really work because of the characteristics of the land. And so again and again, there's been a lot of stones turned. It's not that that's the case. So I think this background, this long background of kind of lack of success makes this option particularly attractive. I would prefer option 2, although either would work fine, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what, if State Parks makes a presentation, I would be interested to hear more. So in closing, I'll just say, in the past few years, we've had some very practical county commissioners, starting with when Representative Brock Smith was in, Susan Brown and Tom Huxley. They've built one after another, working towards advancing consideration of this land swap. No other board has ever been able to get this across the finish line, and so I'm really hoping that you guys will be the board that can get this done. I'd like to just also ask that you please, as part of your discussion, help us all to understand what the process will be moving forward on how the commissioners will make consideration of the proposal. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We have one more, Sue.
I think it's Sweet.
Sweet?
Correct. My name is Sue
Morning,
Sweet.
Sue.
Good morning. I live at Flores Lake for 4 generations. I'm a 5th generation Oregonian. For 4 generations, my family has chosen to live at Flores Lake because of the pristine beauty there, which we hope you will make a decision today that will preserve that. I also had the honor of serving on state parks as a commissioner for 8 years. Chris is here representing state parks. They have the expertise and the financial resources to take care of this land that we love. I visited with Chris for just a moment. This is an example of the staff of parks. He camped at Humbug last night, chose to hike Cape Blanco, recorded sounds, and I'll be darned, said the frogs were singing and there were 2 different frog sounds, and he was going to go home to listen to them carefully to distinguish the difference.
Sue, you said the frogs were singing?
We're singing, croaking, singing, yes. So this is the kind of care that this land that we all love will be given by state parks. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sue, Chris, are you going to be around for a little bit in case we have questions?
That's what that was my next thing.
Thank you.
I was going to verify that you were going to stay. Thank you. All right, that's the comments that we have on this. Oh, I don't have any.
Chris Hawthorne.
Did you not fill out a public? Go ahead, Chris. Come on up.
Bring him up, please.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Chris Hawthorne, and I worked on the Real Property Task Force with Julie in 2015. We spent 9 months going over the inventory of all county lands, and this particular property was one that we spent a lot of time on. We really, to make a long story short, we concluded that the best case scenario would be a land swap with the state, and I'm very delighted, as everybody else is, that this is actually coming to fruition, and I think it's really bodes well for the future of Curry County. I've noticed over the last 10 years that a lot of young people are moving back to northern Curry County, and I think this is a good sign for our future. And I think the big reason is the natural beauty that we have, and the fact that it's not overrun with people. So I really encourage you to adopt one of these proposals, and thank you for considering.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris, would you do me a favor before you leave? Would you make sure that Julie has your contact information? I'd like to maybe speak with you down the road about another issue, and I know you worked on Julie with the accessible lands in Curry. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm George Coupler. I live in Brookings, the south part of the county. My wife and I have been to Flora Lake and thoroughly enjoy the area. I'm actually ready to see government work. This land swap has been studied, discussed, proposals made, appraisals completed, and so much more over 10 years. It's time to shoulder the responsibility. Bonnie and I are in favor of this land swap. I think you have the ability and the responsibility to make it happen, and that's something that's sometimes very difficult in government. We are in support of either option and look forward to having this move forward and having a completion. It's something we can all be very, very proud of. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sure.
I've only been in Oregon for 53 years.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Terry McDonald. I live at Flores Lake, on Flores Lake. I'm a transplant from the Midwest, and when I first came to Oregon, coming from the state of Michigan, I was totally blown away by the beauty and pristine of the state. But that's one thing. But to get more detailed, I've spent a lot of time on the Rogue River, not quite as much as Gort has, but I've made about 25 trips down the canyon. And there's a spot in the canyon in Huggins Canyon where there's a sandbar, and I have a picture of my daughter when she was 12 years old sitting on that sandbar, and she's now 56, and that sandbar is exactly the same. And the reason I state this is because there are many areas like that in Oregon that are wilderness areas that are exactly the same today as they were many years ago, and you have an opportunity now to put something in place that will be there for your grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and many others in the future. Those opportunities don't come around every day, but that's one of the things that makes Oregon, Oregon. So I encourage you to take the steps to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd also like to say, I don't know if anyone in here knows, but the President signed into law yesterday the Protections Act for the Rogue River and this whole area. So it takes a lot of work from people caring, and it will be protected in perpetuity.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
The sandbar that you referenced in Huggins Canyon, we shared that a lot. It was kind of our getaway for kids and grandkids both, and it is beyond special. Thanks for, I almost got choked up there when I envisioned that. Thanks again.
All right, moving on. We're going to move on to presentations. Ken Duque, Curry Community Health. Morning, Mr. Duque.
Morning, Mr. Chair, County Commissioners. Is there somebody who's operating a computer if I give you a presentation?
I'm not a technical wizard here.
We could get
Charles?
Charles.
Mr. Charles.
Thank you.
There's only one item on there, so it'll be really easy.
Thanks, Charles.
You're going to need a mouse, I think.
Not if there's only one item. Quick, dude.
For what?
There it is. Oh, there's 27 pages. Okay, yeah, you might need the mouse.
But it's really big print.
You must know our age.
Sweet.
Excellent. I think I got it from there. Yep. Well, thank you. Good morning, commissioners, staff, and citizens. I'm Ken Duque. I'm the CEO for Curry Community Health. We try to get over to the county at least once a year and do a presentation about the services we provide. Starting with this particular report today, we'll be doing these quarterly in the future.
Right.
It's a little easier to keep up on the information as opposed to doing it once a year. So this will be our first quarter report. Even though the first quarter is not done, we'll give you as much information as we have about the current quarter. So I want to talk a little bit about our background. Back in about, whoa, that went too far. Back in 2012, the county started talking with the Director of Human Services here and Public Health about creating a nonprofit entity and pulling those services outside of the county. And that movement was made on February 1, 2013. The state has changed a lot of the rules along the way. In the beginning, the county was actually able to transfer over the Public Health Authority and the Mental Health Authority to CCH in that process, but the state started changing the rules because there were about 5 or 6 counties that were doing the same type of activity. So we went out on February 1, 2013, and probably by 2014 we had to start making some changes in public health, and by 2015 we really made our most significant changes. We have Ben Cannon, who is both a county employee and a CCH employee, so he's 0.25 for the county and 0.75 for CCH. This is how the county has their public health authority that runs through Ben Cannon, and he works directly with the liaison chair. He was previously working with your county administrator, so we'll need to work on who has Ben reporting to. Is it the liaison? Is it going to be Julie? Who is he going to specifically work with? Then the state came back and they said, oh gosh, we want vital statistics to be done by the county. A contractor or subcontractor cannot provide that service. So we worked with John Huddle, who's your attorney, and the commissioners at the time in hiring a full-time employee at the county. And so Karen Larson is your 1.0 FTE. She is supported from the funds that come through vital statistics and environmental health. So we're not using any general fund dollars to support her. This is about $28,000 comes in on vital statistics, and that number will ebb and flow. And then the environmental health is the other supportive piece because she's providing support services. We have a deputy registrar, and that's an employee of ours who backs up Karen in the event that she's gone, or if there's been a lot of requests coming in. There are some things that really changed contractually. In the beginning, CCH used to sign all the contracts with Oregon Health Authority. But as the public health changes occurred, the first contract that went back to the county and was required to was the environmental health contract, followed by the vital statistics contract, then followed by the entire public health contract. And the reason for that is the state didn't want to do three-party contracts anymore. The state was essentially contracting with Curry County, Curry Community Health, and it was just too cumbersome. So now the county is actually contracting for those services with OHA and then subcontracting out to us to actually provide the service. There are some other contracts that we do on our own, like health and promotion, and health and promotion provides the drug prevention funds and the special project funds. That's also our drug prevention funds, which are 2 separate programs. And also currently we're signing all of the behavioral health contracts. That's for mental health and for substance use disorders. We have a full-time behavioral health director, Erin Porter. She's 100% funded by our agency, but Curry County did designate her as the community mental health director. And since February 1, 2013, we have not relied on any general funding nor received any general funding at all from Curry County. Our service locations, when we began, we were in 11 different spots, which was a little consuming. So we've gotten down to just these few areas that we have here that are very accessible for all of our clients. In Brookings, we're on 615 5th Street. That's about 13,000 square feet of building under roof with a 6,000 square foot warehouse on the back end of it. About 3 acres of property right there, almost in the central part of Brookings. We've made a lot of improvements to the building. We'll continue to do that. And we'll see this increase in service numbers that's really attributed to us being able to expand our facilities. We have a school-based health clinic over at the school, and that's recently transitioned. Then where did we relocate to? Okay. And then in Gold Beach, we have the Gold Rush Center. We started there with like 1 or 2 offices, and right now we're leasing about 70% of that building. And then we have the Mines Clubhouse down on Airport Way, and that is a drop-in center. And then we have the Hammond House Apartments, which we lease out to some of our clients. And then we have the Port Orford facility, which we went from 4 days of service down to 1 day of service because the demand was down, and now we're cycling that back up based on demand. So we're going to be open 3 days a week here in the next, probably certainly by the 1st of April, but probably before that. We've tried to do as much as we can out in the community. So doing our jobs are important, but we want to try to create a positive environment. We're really focused on that. What are the different ways that we can work with people? And so the things that you see in bold are programs we're going to continue. The things that are not in bold are things that we tried, but we decided probably not a good idea to continue that. So the summer kickball program was a huge success. We had a huge turnout in Brookings, and we'll continue to do that this year. We combine that with a prevention poster contest. So we'll be looking for those younger kids, that 8 to 12 range, to do that poster contest. The Thanksgiving meals, we did deliver them to 8 families, but we had a little disparity in trying to figure out who those 8 families were. We were working with some of our partners, and it was just a little too confusing. So I think we'll drop that and look for some other ways to help. We did a Jolly Good Time, which we hired a Santa Claus, and we went to every city. We were in Brookings, Gold Beach, and in Port Orford. And we had Santa there for all the kids. It was really designed for 12 and under. And we had a free gift for all the kids. They got to pick whatever they wanted. And we bought stuff that was in a particular age group. So it was really good that we were able to do that, and a lot of parents were able to come out. We had a really good showing on that. We provided over 280 gifts countywide. We expect that that program will grow this next season. We have a disc golf tournament we've been doing now for, I think we're coming up on our 4th year, and that's done here in Gold Beach, and we'll continue to do that. We have a No Hurry and Scurry, which is a run, a 5K, and last year was our first stab at it, and I think we had 28 contestants. Hopefully we'll see that number increase. We want to stick with that. A good run will generally take 3 to 5 years to cultivate the right amount of folks. In the last couple of years, we've donated 5 of our vehicles to local nonprofits. So they get to a stage where the mileage is getting up there. They're still running, they're still functional, they've been serviced, but we give them up to the nonprofits so that they can use them or they can sell them and take those proceeds and use them for their business. We are not going to do that. In the future, what we're going to be doing is when we have a vehicle that we need to dispose of that's still functional, we're going to allow our clients to write essays, and whichever client has the best essay and graded, they're going to get awarded that vehicle, along with an award of up to $500 so that we can transfer the title, which sort of protects our interests. And at the same time, we want to be able to provide them with a couple of months of automobile insurance. Sure. So we'll be doing our first round on that pretty quick. We provide mental health first aid training in the community, and generally that's 2 to 3 sessions. We have first aid and CPR training that we're starting to do free to the citizens. We did our first class about 2 months ago. And so our goal is, in Brookings, we're going to offer it free, in Gold Beach, free, and then in Port Orford, free once per year. And there'll be a maximum of probably 20 folks that could attend that. We recently did a drug prevention training with law enforcement agencies, and we combined that with the naloxone training. We invited the schools. We had a really good turnout when we did that. There were over 100 people at the training. In Brookings, we followed that training up here in Gold Beach, and again, we had about 60 people at that, so that was a pretty productive thing. And the naloxone, again, are the mist sprays that you use for people who are having an opioid overdose. And then finally, last year we added a yoga studio. We rented a space, we created a yoga studio, and we hired a trainer, and the goal here was we have folks in around prescription pain medication, and we want to get them off that pain medication. And physical therapy is the best thing that you can do to start moving away from that reliance on medication. And we've had some real success with this. We've had some of our patients actually get off pain medication and sort of begin that pathway. We're not like at the advanced stage of yoga here. This is really beginner stuff, and just really getting them to move their bodies and be a little bit more in tune with who they are. And, you know, if just one person stops taking that pain medication, I feel like we've succeeded, but we've had a fair amount of success with that. So we'll continue to do those in the next year. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ben. And just
okay. Ben Cannon, Public Health Administrator. Thank you for your time. I just want to talk briefly about public health services and what we do in public health. We provide a broad array of services to Curry County residents, to include environmental health, which is food, fuel, and lodging, and water inspections and safety. School-based health center, as Ken mentioned, down in Brookings, we do tuberculosis case management, public health emergency preparedness, tobacco prevention, women, infants, and children, or WIC, as we normally call it, reproductive health, child and adolescent health, immunizations, vital records, safe drinking water, living well with chronic conditions, and drug and alcohol prevention. And within these programs, we have quite a few folks who engage in these services. Kind of specifically, I want to touch on two programs that we see a lot of engagement in, and that is our WIC program, immunizations in WIC, and environmental health. The WIC program this last year, really their goal is to ensure optimal nutrition and lifelong health for every family in Curry County. And this last year, 48% of pregnant women in Curry County engaged in WIC services. And the WIC program served 447 families in the county, providing them with healthy food options, community support, health education, nutrition education, and also referrals to healthcare providers. The environmental health program, while we're going to look a little bit later at service numbers and how many services we provided. We have one health inspector, a registered environmental health specialist. The number of services provided may look low, but the impact that the environmental health program has on every member of our county is great. He inspects all of our restaurants, hotels, water systems, and provides that service to ensure that they're operating in a safe manner, and really acts as a resource to work with these owners and operators to help them achieve that safety. You'll see here, these are our trends, one too far, for public health services since June, so starting this fiscal year. As I mentioned, you'll see high engagement in WIC services, immunizations, and our school-based health center. Just to see that share there, 36% of our services are WIC, followed by immunizations, school-based health center, and then kind of a toss-up between environmental health, reproductive health. But as I mentioned, environmental health, we have one service provider who's going out and doing those inspections, and the impact is very high there. These are our trends, and you'll notice kind of a drop over the past few years. This is largely due to greater engagement in health insurance. We saw a great increase in health insurance coverage and people seeking services, clinical services, through their primary care physicians. So we've seen a decrease in our clinical services and our nursing services. And more on that, we're also operating under a new kind of paradigm in public health, and that is called public health modernization. And this is a statewide effort to focus on kind of our foundational capabilities and programs, and those include communicable disease, health promotion, environmental health, and equitable access to health services. So going forward, we're focusing more on these population-based approaches to health. That's really what public health is doing. We're not primarily clinical service providers. We do offer some clinical services through our nurses, but we're really working to ensure the population health of Curry County residents. So, thank you.
When the county was working on transferring these services out of the county and going nonprofit, one of the bigger issues is that none of these services really pay for themselves. There's not enough money. As I recall from my past in dealing with the budgets when I was a Curry County employee, generally public health was anywhere from $180,000 to $260,000 a year in the red, because the state simply just doesn't give enough money. Period, end of story. And I don't think you'd get any debate from any county on that. So how do you continue to provide those services? What do you do? Do we just provide those services based on the funds that they're giving us? What would that look like? That would look like about 40, maybe 45% of what we're doing today. Those are real numbers. In 2016, and we have an external auditor that audits our books. In 2016-17, our organization took a loss of $358,000 that was attributed to public health. In 17-18, we took a $383,000 loss on public health. We don't get to write that off. We're a nonprofit. There's no other pots of money that we get to use. And this year, based on our current budget, we're looking at about a $200,000 loss for this year. So in the last 3 years, we've invested nearly $1 million into the county for public health services. We knew that we were going to need to do this for a period of time. Some people might say, why would you do that? Well, we do that because that's what we're here to do. We do need to find a way to move that number down. And why you see the difference, almost cutting it in half between 17-18 and 18-19, is really figuring out what resources do we need for public health. Public health in our county used to be very RN intensive, registered nurse intensive. There were 4 nurses. We found that we don't need 4 nurses. We had a nurse that was really in charge of communicable diseases, but there's no requirement to have a nurse in charge of communicable diseases. You need somebody who's tracking the program, monitoring those diseases, contacting physicians, letting the state know what the statistics are, working with our providers and making sure they're getting the care they need. And so those changes were able to bring us down to about that $200,000 loss level. As we work through some of our processes over the next year, we'll be talking to the county. The state has offered to start doing matching funds for counties that are providing support for public health. And so what could that look like? Well, if we're 200,000 in the hole, if our organization continued to put in 50 and the county put in 50 and the state matched that 100, well, then we're a break even. The question is, does the county have $50,000 to give?
Commissioner Gold?
I just wanted to ask one question about public health nurses because I've gotten inquiries about this. Can you tell me what programs that you oversee that require a public health nurse?
Immunizations.
Okay.
Reproductive health. Let me go back. That way I'm not just drawing it out of my mind. So the nurses will occasionally get involved in environmental health if our inspector is out and they have questions. So it's not like environmental health is just Kent and that's it. The school-based health center, our RNs go up there and do visits. Our TB case management, that's all nursing. And we occasionally will get somebody who will test positive for a TB and we have to put them on the regimen and they need to be monitored. And if they really did have TB, then they have to be quarantined. And then our nurse has to go over there and make sure they stay in quarantine. Our public health emergency preparedness, that's no. Our TPEP is no. Our WIC program, yes. Our WIC person, Heather Cerna, does an awesome job. We've got one of the best WIC programs in the state. Has to contact that RN and work with that RN. The reproductive health program is all RN driven. You have to be an RN in order to deliver that service set. The child and adolescent health, sometimes. Immunizations, yes, because the RNs are the ones giving those shots. Vital statistics, no. Safe drinking water program, no. Living well with chronic conditions, no. And drug and alcohol prevention, no.
So how many health nurses do you have?
So we had 4, and we should be at 2. We are at 1 full-time nurse right now. We've got another one coming on soon. And so 2 is completely functional. And again, it's sort of going back and looking at those numbers. You know, let's get to those trends and look at those trends. Ooh. When you have 3,500 services in total that you're doing, and I'm just looking at the previous year, you can really think about how many of those are attributed to nursing.
Okay. Thanks.
And we're certainly open to any feedback. If anybody has another way, we'd certainly like to hear it, because it's a real challenge to figure out how to provide these services with the limited funds that we receive.
Yeah, and I'm just concerned because sometimes I get calls, and that's why I'm bringing some of these issues up. So, not to point fingers or anything.
Not at all.
Okay.
So I want to, go back to this and just say, where our agency gets this money, it's not like we're taking from behavioral health to pay for public health, and we're not taking money from addiction. That's not the way it works. We do private services. So we have third-party pays in our organization, and when I get to our budget sheet, I'll show you that. This year it's down to $1 million that we make on sort of our private venture, if you will. It's been as high as $1.8 million in a particular year. And so these are third-party folks that are not part of the OHP plan, and they're not coming in for a public health service. These are just regular folks who use us for a physician. They may come in and use our psychiatry, and they may come in and use our other programs, but they have private insurance. And we are credentialed with 11 different insurance companies, and I'm not including the CCOs in that. So that's Blue Cross, Blue Shield, LifeWise, MODA, etc. So we are really engaged in that. So we're a nonprofit, so it's not a profit, but our net assets at the end of the year go towards paying for this loss. But with our revenue declining, we have to talk about a way to get out of that.
So it's kind of like you've got two different businesses going at once. You've got stuff going through the county.
It's all under one
private.
It's all under one roof. We provide services for the county. We also contract with both coordinated care organizations. So that's All Care, who has about half of the OHP membership, and then we have Advanced Health up in Coos Bay, again, that has about half the membership. There's about 5,200, because it changes every month, but there's about 5,200 OHP clients in the county, and about 2,600 for each of those CCOs. And again, that will ebb and flow.
Thanks.
All right, Meredith. You roll it, and I can do it for you if you'd like me to.
I got it. Hi, I'm Meredith Walker. I'm the Substance Use Disorder Supervisor, otherwise known as the Addictions Program. And so first I'm just going to go through some of the services that we offer. The bulk of the services that we offer in the Addictions Program are going to be the first few that you see listed. The individual therapy, the group therapy, the drug screening UAs, and DUI education, which is a very specific education group for folks who've gotten a DUI. Group therapy is a really significant piece of what we do. Most clients will go to groups more often than they do individual sessions. We also offer case management, which can be a wide area of things. That can be if someone needs help accessing housing resources, or needs help getting connected to outside support, or it can be just helping a client navigate probation, child welfare, just anything kind of outside of that clinical piece that the counselors help with. Discharge planning for clients complete. We want them to have a really strong relapse prevention plan, some outside support, so that final stage of treatment tends to be some really great discharge planning. Relapse prevention, which happens in individual sessions and in groups. Then we have our referral services. We do offer anger management, parenting classes. We offer Love and Logic. Problem gambling services. We are bringing on a new counselor who will be our problem gambling counselor, and then gambling prevention. Real quick, I'm just going to go back here. So these are the services that we offer, but I do want to take a moment to tell you about two programs and services that we offer that aren't necessarily on here, but are really important for everybody to know about. So we have a program called SPURF, which stands for Strengthening, Preserving, and Reuniting Families. And that is where a client who is involved with child welfare, potentially their children are in foster care, sometimes their children are with them, and they also have a substance use disorder diagnosis. They're able to work with our program in a really different way, to where we have a counselor can spend time out in the community with that person, going to their home, doing home visit, working on parenting skills, working on skills around recovery that directly relate to being a parent and to getting all those different pieces of their life back together so they can successfully parent. The counselor can go to court with them, family decision meetings, and really advocate and help that individual work with child welfare in a way that's going to be successful and impactful. So that's a really fantastic program that we offer, and we actually have 0.5 FTE set aside to where we have a counselor who can spend 20 hours a week with those SPERF clients. We also have a new service called Treatment Readiness Group that I'm really just trying to get everybody in the community to know about. This is essentially, there's so many people out there who aren't sure if they need treatment, who haven't been successful in treatment before, who really don't even know what that means. What is substance use disorder treatment? Do I even want to go there? Well, they can come to this group Mondays at 5 o'clock. It's a non-enrolled group, and they can learn about treatment. They can learn about the different levels of care. They can learn about maybe they need residential. Where's that offered? Who takes their insurance? They can get connected with a peer mentor during that time. There's just a really great service for people who are pre-treatment and just haven't really gotten there yet. And so these are our total services delivered for this year. So that's 2,711 services so far this year. Our utilization, as you can see, the majority of that is treatment. The small piece of anger management and gambling treatment, we do expect the gambling treatment to go up somewhat now that we're onboarding a new problem gambling counselor. As you can see, the trends here for our substance use disorder services. And now I'm going to turn it over to the mental health program, and I'm going to leave some flyers for Treatment Readiness Group.
1 second, please, Commissioner Gold.
I'm going to ask you one question.
Perfect.
I keep getting all these questions from the outside, so I'm going to
great.
ask you. I knew Curry Community Health was involved in the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and that it requires a 3-person team. Do you have that 3-person team in place?
We certainly do, yes.
Good, good.
Yeah, we actually
Because I
have,
hear that's a really great program.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have capacity for 6. We have a peer mentor who's dedicated to our team, somebody with lived experience who can help our clients navigate recovery, myself, and then capacity for 3 counselors.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're all in place, and
we
out
have
there?
2 counselors in place, and we have another one starting in April. So we will be fully staffed and ready to.
That's good to know, because that's a big problem in our community.
Absolutely, yeah. The need is significant, and we are ready to help people.
Okay.
All
Great.
right.
Thanks, Meredith.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. I'm here to talk to you about some of the mental health programs. I'm Erin Porter. I'm the Behavioral Health Director. And I'm not going to go through each bullet on the list, but I'd just like to highlight 2 of them. One being the ACT, or the Assertive Community Treatment Program. We took a stab at ACT this last year. It is a high-fidelity program that requires a rather large team of individuals to run it. So you need an ACT lead who is also a therapist. You need a chemical dependency counselor, a nurse, a case manager, a peer support specialist, and a supported employment specialist. And so having that full team on board and dedicated to a small group of individuals who have been determined to be severely, persistently mentally ill. We are currently transitioning and looking at how the ACT program has been run after that first year, what areas did we do well in, and what areas do we need to improve. And so we are taking the next 6 months to really evaluate that and look at that. In 6 months' time, we anticipate looking at restarting again and using what we've learned and relaunching the ACT program. In this 6-month in-between period, we're doing a program that we're naming Bridges. And that program is going to be very similar to ACT, but have a smaller team of staff dedicated to it. So one of the biggest challenges we've had with ACT has been that large team of individuals that it requires, and the amount of funding it takes to do that for a group of individuals that are around half a dozen or so. So the other program I'd really like to highlight is our supported employment.
I hate to interrupt you,
Interrupt
but
me?
I've heard really good things about the ACT program, and I heard the same thing that you were saying, that you had problems getting staffing and so forth. And this is one of the areas that I've been getting a lot of calls, is on the mental health. And I'm glad to hear that you're strengthening it, but you were approved for this bridge program. Is that right, that you're moving on and forward with that?
Yep, we're approved for this bridge program because we certainly don't want to just say, well, we're going to take 6 months and not continue to provide support to the individuals that were already enrolled in ACT. So those individuals that were enrolled will just transition over to the Bridges program, and really the only difference they're going to see is a change in name of the program. They're not going to see a change in the services they're receiving. They're not going to see a change in the service providers who are assisting them, except that as we build that team so that we can then go back into a full ACT program.
Right, and the only reason I'm kind of bugging you on this is because I think this is one of our big weaknesses here in Curry County, is this mental health piece, and we need to work on it, I think, together, not just Curry Community Health, but also Curry General, that they don't have those services available. So
yeah, it has been a challenge, and I'll get into crisis. The hospital is certainly challenged in being able to care for individuals who are in a mental health crisis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. Our supported employment program is a program that we've been running for quite a while. It's also a high fidelity program. One of the challenges that individuals with mental illness face is being able to obtain employment and then retain employment. And so supported employment isn't just getting people jobs, it's really sitting with the individual and finding out what do they want for their career, and then working with them towards that end goal of a career and what steps they need to take to achieve that, and evaluating what has been the barriers to date in getting that career going. And we work with employers as well. So if somebody is really interested in going into construction, then we would work with local independent contractors and talk with them about would they be willing to consider hiring a person who maybe has mental illness or has some struggles. The individual with mental illness really drives how involved we are with the employer once employment is found. So if they don't want us talking to their employer, and they don't want their employer to know that there's that connection, we don't talk with the employer, and we don't tell the employer that there's a connection. If the person does want that, then we're able to go on the job with them and help them identify areas where the employer would like to see them improve and help them achieve that improvement. We then follow that person for at least 1 year post-employment, doing regular check-ins to make sure that everything is going well. So we've had really good success with that, and as people with mental illness obtain employment, their self-worth increases dramatically and their mental health symptoms decrease. Whoops, going the wrong way. That's kind of par for course for me.
Nope.
I know, always a fish swimming the wrong way up the river. So our mental health services delivered to date this year. You can see that the one that really kind of stands out is the individual therapy, which includes the assessment and service plans, the one-on-one therapy with master's level counselors. We continue to grow groups, so we have a number of groups available in Brookings. We're working on developing some additional groups here in Gold Beach. Our psychiatric services, we're the only psychiatric provider in Curry County, and then we have a number of people come up from Del Norte and Humboldt counties as well to see our psychiatric providers. And so we have about a 3-hour travel radius around us that all of those individuals seem to come in. So our psychiatrists, our nurse practitioners are working away at that. So our service trends, our case management has picked up a lot over the last year, and those case managers are really instrumental in helping people connect to benefits, helping break down barriers to getting the medical services they need. And we continue to just provide more and more services, which I hope means that our community members are getting healthier as they're getting more support. And then Ken will talk with you about crisis.
Thank you.
So we started breaking out our crisis program, and we're missing, that's mental health services trend. What happened here? So we're measuring, I'm missing one page, but okay, I just need to get booted back up here. We've been tracking this for the last several years. So far, in this particular year to date, and this is through the end of January, we've provided 1,089 crisis services. And these are people that need help. They're in crisis, and it's not fun. When we first opened our clinic up in 5th Street in Brookings, we started to see a large number of people come in for crisis. So the good news is they're not going to the hospital, law enforcement hasn't engaged, and instead they're actually coming in for that crisis service. The bad news is we weren't prepared for that. Never in Curry County's history that I'm aware of did we build a drop-in center for crisis appointments. So we're currently remodeling our Brookings office to make an independent crisis drop-in center. And when I start going over the numbers, you'll see why. So we measure that by where are the different areas where we're seeing crisis. So we have walk-ins at all of our facilities, so Port Arthur, Gold Beach, Brookings. We have our mobile crisis. We respond to the Curry County Jail because some people have some problems over at the jail. We obviously go to the ED because some folks will make it to the ED. And then we have case managers that are assigned to these folks that are having these crisis issues. And the value there is once they leave the emergency room or once they leave our office, the most important thing to do is continue to follow up with them. You know, are they taking their medication on time? Are they eating? Do they have a place to stay? Do they have a support system? And the case managers are working all those issues and really trying to reinforce that individual. Our goal is to slow this number down. It seems like it's just continued to escalate over time.
Ken, quick question, because
Yes, sir.
we have to take breaks because we start early. Union rules, we have to take a break for some of our employees. About how much longer do you have?
I think that's why I asked to drive for a little bit. I think I can get through this in 10 minutes.
Okay.
And if not, just throw something at me. I'll try to talk fast.
You're doing fine. Set this up there.
Awesome. So now you can see the utilization for our crisis, and you can see, you know, the largest number on there is our case management services, which should be. That means that we're actually going out and working with these folks. But the next highest is the Brookings walk-in at 16%. And then we get down to the jail at 12%. The emergency room is at 11%, Gold Beach walk-ins. But the point is to show you how these services are getting utilized and where we're spending most of our time doing that. Here's the trend over the last several years. You can see we kind of started at that 1,200 level. It's gone up as high as 18, and you saw we were at on the current year at 1,000, and that was only through January. So we spend quite a bit of time doing this. It's interesting. People will call us like thinking we're sitting behind a desk waiting for them to call. And all of my providers are busy. All of our staff are busy, and so that's one area we got to work on. We got to get better about responding to the phones, but we're also really hyper-focused on our clients.
Are you open 24/7?
We are on call 24/7.
Oh, okay.
And we respond 24/7. That's why we have the mobile crisis. Here's an important set of facts. We track every complaint. We don't care what the complaint is. We don't like the name of your building. Okay, that's a complaint. That was a valid complaint. That was a real complaint that came out. That's part of these numbers. So when we look at the 17-18 complaint category, there were 37 complaints out of nearly 30,000 services delivered. That means that that's a 0.1% complaint ratio. We're really focused on how our clients feel about our service. That's where we're focused. We sometimes hear complaints from people that don't use our services. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in how we're doing with our clients. That speaks volumes. 18 is where we're at today on our current year to date, so that's this lower box here. And so we're on track right now to actually have a better year, less complaints than we had the previous year. Here's our budget outline for the year. Our state contracts for behavioral health, public health, and primary care, just under $2 million. Our third-party contracts, as I talked about earlier, slightly over $1 million. Our CCO contracts are $3.1 million. Brings our total revenue to $6.1 million. Does not include some pass-through that we do for Bell Cove, which is a residential treatment facility. You can see that our costs here, we have 67 positions in our company. So we're really highly driven by our personnel cost. That's the largest share. We're set this year to have a net ending balance of $260,000, but that does not include the capital improvements to buildings and fleet expansion of $230,000. So really our carryover number is probably going to be closer to $30,000 to $40,000. We might change the amount of money we put into our building or fleet to try to get this number up. Any money that's left over at the end of the year goes into our reserve. We pay for hospitalizations if somebody needs to be hospitalized, and some of those can be as much as $45,000 a month. We've never asked Curry County to pay any of those bills. We've paid 100% of them. We've never asked the CCOs to pay those bills. We pay 100%. So this gives you an idea of our working budget. And again, this is the number I'm concerned about on our third party. We've been as high as 1.8 million in our third party. It's been declining, and that's because we tend to have a higher OHP population. About 85% of our clients are Oregon Health Plan. So as our ability to invest money into the county dwindles, that's when we need to have a better partnership and try to figure out how we're going to fund these programs. Our board of directors, we have Ed Conyers, who's the chair. He's from Port Orford. We have Everett Dial. He's from Port Orford, and he's a district attorney. He's our vice. Court Boyce, commissioner, is a member. County commissioner has always been on our board from the start and should be. John Spicer, who is a retired attorney, is a member. Holly Stevens, who is a school counselor in Brookings, is on our board. And we have 2 new people joining us in May, and I'm not going to release their names until they've been to the next board meeting and get fully authorized and approved. I'm the CEO. Carol Cook, who is standing back here. Raise your hand, Carol. She's our CFO. Aaron, you've met. Ben, you've met. And Carly Cruz is our, I don't have Ben on, oh yeah, I do have Ben on there. I'm missing one. And Carly is our attorney, and she's on vacation today. Want to talk briefly about some local economic impact. These are payroll and benefit that hits the county. And so I want to go back over the last few years. You can see those numbers between 17 and 18 were fairly flat, and we're seeing a slight increase in 19 because we went from 62 employees to 67. We added 5 new jobs. So those dollars are hitting our local economy. These are people that are renting homes. These are people who are moving in from out of the area, that are families that are adding kids to our schools, which means that they're getting more ADA funds coming in from the state. We're buying cars from our local folks here. We use the local restaurants. That's quite a chunk of change that's getting put into the community. And all the folks live here in Curry County with the exception of one person who's a psychiatric provider. We do have employee turnover. Everybody in Curry County's had turnover. It's never really changed. I have friends of mine who have restaurants, and it's interesting because employees will move from one restaurant to the other, and as you're dining out at different places, you'll see them shift around. Our problem is we have to hire people who are credentialed and licensed and they simply don't exist in this area. So we have to go outside to get them in. And over the last 3 years, we do exit reports, interviews on all of our staff, and these are the top 5 reasons that people have given us over and over again for the reasons they're leaving. Housing, affordability, availability, and habitability. It's so bad right now that we just rented a house, our company, so that the next time somebody new moves in and they need a place to stay, we have a place for them to stay. The environment, the weather, lack of diversity, lack of entertainment, too much negative media, both socially and in the news. Geographic isolation, a 2-hour drive for shopping, road condition, lack of services. Childcare and medical resources, limited childcare and affordability issues, limited medical resources in schools, and then the one that hurts me the most is people just moving back home. They just don't like the area. And unfortunately, when you add jobs, so when we pulled this out from the county, we had 36 people. We have 67 now. That's 31 new jobs. It's going to take a while to fill that out. And we also have to try to address some of this stuff that sometimes we don't have an answer for. We do very comprehensive corporate operational goals. This year we have 41 of them. Commissioner Boyce is well aware of what these are. But we focus on our financial strength, the services we're providing, our programs we provide, what our facilities and our operations are like, and our human resources. And I'm not going to go through those, but I just wanted to show you the base for that. And finally, last page, this is what we want to work on, our projects with Curry County during this calendar year. We want to continue to develop the enforcement codes necessary to support environmental health. And so I'm a man of my word. It's a $10,000 check. Compliance officer.
Thank you. Is there any strings attached to that?
No. All I said is if the county hires a code enforcement officer, we're going to give you $10,000. That was 3.5 years ago.
You know we're looking for another one.
A little bit.
But
so
it's effective.
We want to work on that. We want to increase our environmental health inspections. We really need to. So we're going to be, we're currently recruiting for a half-time health inspector to help out Kent. We want to work with Curry County to review the current programs provided by us. We have a commissioner that sits on our board and sits through this, but we'll start coming here for those quarterly presentations. We want to work with you on getting your county accountant to come over and work with our CFO every month and just kind of do a spot check on the grants and the funds that we're getting from the state and the Fed. And I already talked about the quarterlies, and then we want to work with you on developing a written oversight policy and monitoring plan. We'll actually develop that and then give you guys the draft so that you can move that around as you feel appropriate, and we'll set up a workshop for that soon. And then we want to develop a standardized subrecipient, subcontractor risk analysis tool. Any questions?
I like the idea of the accountability here. That's good. So we know what's going on.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we're good, Ken. Thank you so much.
I tried to go fast.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, so because we have to take a 10-minute recess, we'll make it quick. We'll be back in 10 minutes. That we can get everyone heard and we don't have to hold people all day. All right, so next we're going to hear from, is it Luke Pike from Curry Transfer? Morning.
Good morning. I'm Luke Pike with Curry Transfer and Recycling. This is Candy Wilk, our office manager and recycle coordinator. We are here today to make a proposal to you guys on cart recycling to county residents that we currently provide recycled curbside pickup already. This is a modern program. You know, Commissioner Posh, you said 4G this morning, talking about Curry County. Well, this is 4G for our industry. It's really has been a program that across the state, Washington and California, very popular. It's been around for 20 plus years that we want to bring to Curry County residents. we rolled out the same program in 2018, January 2018, in the city of Brookings. It took us a few months to work out the bugs. Very successful program. Everything that we really wanted to get out of the program, I think that we got. A lot of positive feedback from the residents there. A lot of calls from South County residents on where their carts were. We weren't really prepared for that, and but it was a process that it was just a stepping stone, and this is the next stepping stone that we wanted to expand to. The basis you have in your packets, the whole program basically. I'm not going to go word for word, so I'm just going to summarize it for you guys. But as we move down, the program consists of a 96-gallon and a 64-gallon cart delivered to the resident. Anybody that already recycles or is a resident in these areas that we're providing service already would get a cart. Right now we have these little 18-gallon bins that you have it in, and then you have an 18-gallon bin for glass. You're going to keep the glass, but you're going to have a cart instead. So one of the things is why? It's because we're giving you more space. For whatever reason, it's been proven, the DEQ have proven if you have a cart, the household will yield about 200 pounds more per household if you have more room to recycle in. It's I don't know if it's psychological, but it is a proven fact that in a cart-based program, people tend to recycle more. So it's kind of doing our part to keep this material out of the landfill. Customers that can utilize this cart may be able to downsize their trash cart. So inevitably, they can reduce their monthly cost if the more that they recycle. That's kind of the basis of it. We start out the program by delivering a 64-gallon cart. You have the option of going to a 96, a bigger cart if you so choose. But to start out, we deliver a 96 to everybody, or a 64 to everybody.
And what's the monthly fee on that?
It would be a $3.75 increase monthly, starting at the start of the program. But I'll show you when we get going down further. If you look on the page, we'll get to the pricing. That there's a bit of a difference there. The customer is going to be picked up every other week. Currently, right now, everybody's picked up weekly. The glass will be picked up at the same time. There won't be a change. You put out your recycle and you put out your glass with it. Education, that's huge for us. It's just a continuation of education to get people to recycle more and keep this out of the landfills. As I mentioned, it would be a price increase of $3.75 per month. The benefits of the program, as I mentioned, it's promoting more volume for everybody. It gives them more space to utilize. It gives people an option to downsize their trash cart. Everything's based on your price per month is based on the trash rate. If you can downsize your cart, you can actually save money. Even though there's a $3.75 a month increase for this program, if you're able to downsize, you actually would save even more money. You wouldn't get the price increase technically, and you actually save yourself some cash every month.
Right.
Just basic cleanliness in the county. The cart, has a lid on it. Everything's enclosed on those windy days. Those open bins, everything gets blown around in the ditches and everything. We've seen a huge advantage in the city of Brookings on just the debris around on a windy day. It's cut it in more than half. It's just not out there anymore. The ease of use, carrying the bin out. You can roll the cart out instead of carrying it. We had a lot of positive feedback on that. Safety, for us, safety is our #1 value in our company. It's a lot safer for our driver. It's an automated style pickup instead of getting out and sorting through somebody's recycle. You know, there's people put all kinds of things in there. It can be dangerous. We're putting our hands in there and sifting through things. This way we don't have to. We can pick it up with an arm, dump it, and then we have a camera system that we can actually look and see to make sure someone's not contaminating, but we don't have to actually pick through it. Then the space for the cart's another one. The square footage that a bin takes up is virtually the same what you get as a cart. One of the things when we rolled out in the city of Brookings that was a challenge was people said they didn't have space for a cart. After we rolled it out, and it was, you know, we had a few people call in and say, you know, I don't have room for it. And then after we ran the program for a few weeks, we actually got those calls back and said, yeah, I want to try it out. People can make the space. We work with some individuals on maybe they have some challenging areas. We come in and we'll help you out. It's just a different way of doing things, and people can figure it out, and we'll help.
Commissioner Gold?
I just wanted to kind of make a clarification and make sure that everybody understands that once you go into an area, everybody's going to be paying for the recycling cart whether or not they use it. Is that correct? Or whether they actually receive it?
Yeah, any customer in the areas that are going to be affected are Harbor, that's South County, urban growth boundary areas, and we would do a new addition to the Cape Farello area and the side roads. So the Cape Farello area is the only place that we don't currently pick up curbside recycle, and that would be an addition. Anybody that's in that area, they do get that price increase. It's a way of promoting the recycle. If you don't promote it that way, programs tend to not succeed because it doesn't, I don't want to say force, but it promotes it. People tend to use it if they have that cost there, they tend to use it anyway. We had very few rolling it out to the city of Brookings. We had a few people call in and say, I don't want this cart. And you know, we came back and picked up the cart, and I think I'd say we had 5 of those out of the 2,000 carts that we rolled out, and I know of 2 that actually called in a couple weeks later and wanted the cart back. So pretty small percentage.
So how are you going to get the word out to all these people?
It's going to be advertising, radio, newspaper, website, anything that we can work with you guys on to get the word out. It takes time to roll the program out, to get it ready. We'd have to get carts, things like that. We'd want to advertise for weeks before so nobody's surprised. As far as advertising, do you want to cover the...
Sure. So we did a pretty aggressive campaign kickstart program. We advertised it in the paper. We did, about 2 months before, we just said, coming soon. And we did it's similar to this, but we had advertisement in the paper and on the radio, just coming soon. We had it on our website as well. And then about 2 weeks before the program started, we sent out another campaign saying this is how it's going to work with your roll card is coming, and it will be coming on, at that time it was December 18th. Here's what you need to do. Put out your cart, your recycling cart like you normally do, and we will leave you with a roll cart. And if you don't receive your roll cart, give us a call, and we will make sure we get that to you. So the campaign, we did it fairly aggressive, and we hit it with the radio, the websites, the papers, about a month before. We hit it pretty hard.
Are you going to send a notice in people's bills?
We do that too. We do
okay,
bill
perfect.
messaging as well.
I just want to make sure the people that are involved will know about it.
Yes. So
yeah, it was important to us to not surprise anybody. It benefits everybody letting it be known.
Right. And then when we did actually deliver the roll cards, we attached the laminated list similar to this here. A part of this is recycling and what goes in your garbage can, what goes in your recycle cart and what goes in your glass bin with a calendar on the back for their schedule.
Perfect.
And it actually went pretty smooth. We didn't really have any, we had a few people call and had concerns, but we pretty much addressed them, and after 3 or 4 weeks we were running pretty smoothly. We also put together a fact sheet and 2 weeks before we actually delivered the roll carts, we put those fact sheets in the recycle bin, so when they picked up the recycle bin they had, I think there's about 20 questions on there, how the program worked and questions that they might have.
Oh, so the individuals have to pick up their recycle bins? Or you're going to deliver them?
No, we will deliver them.
They deliver.
No, we didn't.
Perfect. Well, when you said when they pick up, I thought,
No, when they pick
I don't
up,
have a truck.
their recycle, 2 weeks before on their small bins, we just left a flyer in there with
Gotcha.
frequently
Okay.
asked questions.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we've after running this for a year now, I think that was a really big advantage for us, is part of getting those. There was 10, 15 questions on there, and it's answering those before we even start. That was big. I think the only thing that we weren't prepared for was the people around us that weren't part of the program. It was difficult to say, well, hold off, we're not there yet, and this is just that next step.
Yeah, right now we have a few streets in the city of Brookings that are also Park County, Parkview, Marina Heights area. They're Park County, part city, and so some people got it, some people didn't, so that was a little difficult. This label right here is imprinted on the lid. Our lids actually come with this embossed onto the lid, so this will help with our contamination, and we can just point people back to this chart.
Good.
All right.
There's a sample out in the hall too, this cart.
Thank you so much.
Do you have any questions or?
Nice decoration to the hallway out
Do
there.
you want me to keep those there? That there's the small cart, which is everybody, you see people. I brought them in yesterday, and I think by the time I had them set, I had 4 people said, "Oh, that's cute. That's a cute cart." That's a new addition to our cart family, but part of this program. If you recycle as much as you can. Hopefully you have less trash. That gives people 32-gallon cart is a very popular size cart. That's the next step lower. So it does give people an option that they can save some money and get into a smaller cart if they wish. And that's what that little cart's about.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Sorry for that blurt out, Mr. Chair.
Next we have CASA, Mona Chandler. Ms. Chandler, not here. All right. Well,
You want to say what that stands for? Just
Well, CASA is court-appointed special advocates, basically for families and issues with families. We'll maybe bring that back up in a while. Maybe she stepped away for a few minutes. Let's move on to we pulled out L&M out for discussion. Commissioner Gold, you first asked for that, so I'll give you the floor first.
My only concern with the credit cards, I've heard in the past everybody had a credit card, and I just wanted to know if there's a limit, and is there any stipulations in what they use them for or whatever. I would assume that they have to turn in all receipts. And my other question would be, for instance, when people travel, I knew there was kind of a policy in the past that they don't put it on their personal credit cards, but they needed to do it on county cards. So.
Well, I think we're in the middle right now. I've talked with Ms. Schmelzer about this on a couple of occasions. We're in the middle right now of reworking the travel policy. I think that's going to come up on the next agenda or two. I think there's still some tweaking to do on that. As far as credit cards, I personally think they should be at a minimum. I am one that believes that if we travel, you use your personal credit card. You turn in the proper receipts that were necessary, along with the travel voucher forms that are required through the county, and then you're reimbursed. That saves a lot of possible issues with county-issued credit cards that could be used for small items or for other items that aren't necessarily related to county business. So that's my opinion. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Until we get that travel policy done, we're apparently scheduled to buy new cars, and other than the Sheriff's Department, I'm a little baffled by that. We have some trust issues with the citizens at large on, in particular, the last year and a half, 2 years, the money's been spent over my opposition, and yet the public is generally making a connection with that somehow I was responsible for that. We're talking a lot of money. And so I would like to get through the budget process before we do any approving of anything related to that. I mean, I've got...
Related to?
I've got my credit card right here. I don't think it's been used for 3 or 4 months. Maybe we could reactivate it, have that available in the office. I'm just nervous to send a message to the citizens that until, real or perceived, we get what has been the last couple of years, some serious spending, inappropriate in my view, and I've been very outspoken about that. Till we get that under control, I think we just need to keep a lid on everything, get through the budget process, and try and earn our trust back with the people. If I'm perceiving what is out there.
I think that's pretty much, and what I'm hearing is that's the consensus right now of the board, is that we do, you know, we do need a couple of credit cards. I know Ceci needs one for buying ancillary items for the offices here. You know, I can see where Ms. Schmelzer or JJ can use one in the front offices for something that we need to buy. But as far as ever, you know, commissioners and county employees having credit cards to take out on the road with them, I'm in full agreement. I don't think we should have that. I think if a travel is necessary, that we can use our private credit cards once it's authorized for that travel, and then submit the appropriate receipts for it.
I'm just going to make one comment on that. Not everybody uses credit cards. I do personally, and I wouldn't have a problem with that. But there might be some employees that might have a problem because of their credit limits or whatever. I've seen comments about that in the past. So,
if it was something that large, I can imagine that would need to be approved by the board anyway. So if someone had to pay cash for something, I mean, they've still got the receipt to collect, you know, to get reimbursed for their expense.
well, my concern is they don't have the cash to pay up front.
I see.
Well, they can come to the commissioners then. That's,
Well,
our responsibility.
Exactly.
Why complicate it?
Exactly.
Well, if there's an extra credit card floating out there, you possibly could allow that to happen. Let them use that particular one for whatever need they have.
And that's what I think we just discussed, is Ceci having one in the back office for those items that she may need, and either Ms. Schmelzer or JJ holding one in the front for those other items that are going to pop up. But again, I personally don't believe that, you know, everyone needs to have a credit card in their pocket for the county that they can just go and use at their will. I'd rather see it in a much more regimented, organized form when things are purchased, so that there's transparency on everything that gets purchased through this county office. Yes, Ceci?
I'm Sina Crook in the Accounts Payable Finance Department. And it's so much better to have a credit card to travel with. The county doesn't like to have the employees bear the expense of the county business. And it's more difficult to reimburse than it is to pay for it up front. And a lot of departments need to purchase something maybe one time rather than set up an account to buy something from a vendor. They can get it quicker by using a credit card. And the travel part, sometimes the lodging has to be made a couple of months in advance, and it can be made easier with a credit card. And there have been times in the past where we've had to write checks. People have to take a check with them to pay for the lodging, and that's really a nightmare. So the credit cards have really been beneficial. I haven't seen any abuse of them, so I just wanted to state that.
Okay. And I think like we said, we are working on the travel policy, and I understand that we need travel. We're going to need credit cards to travel with. Until we can get that done, though, I just want to limit the amount of credit cards that we have. So, you have something, Ms. Melzer?
Yes, someone just let staff know that there was a ruling made by the Ethics Commission that personal credit cards cannot be used for government purchases due to reasons like rewards and incentives. So that's something we want to aware of.
Yes, and that's another thing. We have to remind people that there can't be any personal gain with the use of county funds. And so we make sure that when they go to Fred Meyer's to purchase something, and they always say, do you have a rewards card? And you automatically say yes. Well, we say, no, you can't do that. So.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. I do think it is something that we need to watch. I know the issue that we had in the BOC office was just registering for conferences and training sessions. It's easier if you have the credit card, and that's why I know we as staff have always encouraged the per diems, but just one thing.
Well, that's my point of possibly you having one, and that we're there if we've got to travel somewhere, you're going to know that we're going to travel there, or, if a department head or someone needs to go somewhere, you're probably going to know about it. The reservations could be made through your office and use that credit card to pay for it. But I just think everyone having a credit card in their pocket is unnecessary.
So just to get this clear, no personal credit cards used because there could be possible personal gain. So use county credit cards. If you have to go through Ms. Schmelzer or John Jesuit, that's fine.
Unless your credit card you're using doesn't offer anything, like any.
I wouldn't use one otherwise, but
it really sounds like we're discussing policy.
Right.
So why don't we just pull those off the agenda right now and look at the policy on it, see if it needs to be tweaked, and get some more information to you.
Okay, that's good.
Commissioner, may I put one comment on this just real quick?
Sure.
Phil McDonald, the Sheriff's Office. Just so you know, I think in most cases it's the actual department head that has a credit card, and then usually, like in the Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff has one. The former captain had one in his name. I chose not to have one in my name, and then the Sheriff's Office has three other general cards that if someone goes to training, they're checked out to them. But we make the reservations, and we go over, every department goes over every receipt and everything. So there's if the offices are doing their jobs and managing their finances, there's no way to cheat because you have to turn in every receipt. So just letting you know, it's usually just the department heads, not individual employees that have those credit cards.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in the interest of just emphasizing the last 3 months is what we've got to get through this budget period. And so I just want to encourage the board that until we know what we're dealing with in that 3 months and how we're going to hopefully land on our feet, I just would be very careful on booking for conventions and all the rest. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on this? Okay, so we're going to pull it off of here, and then we'll bring it back at a later date. All right, so can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda with items L and M extracted.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments? Roll.
Mr. Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, JJ. Next, we're going to move to action items, and I'm glad to see we will get to this before lunch. Action item A, Curry County land swap with state parks. Ms. Schmelzer.
Yes, Chris from State Parks is here. State Parks actually wrote a letter in February with some options for the board to consider. And so Chris from State Parks is going to do a presentation on that, and then we'll have a discussion.
Chair Pash, members of the Commission, Curry County residents. My name is Chris Havel. I'm with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I'm the Associate Director. Here to present to you a proposal from the department on behalf of our Commission in response to the conversation you started about the Flores Lake State Natural Area and adjacent properties that the county owns. You're going to see a lot of things up on screen. I know you're pretty familiar with this. It's come up with you a couple of times. I'm going to be breezing through some things, and if you feel like I'm going too fast or skipping things that you really want to focus on, holler, and I'll stop, and we can do a deep dive. But just as a reminder of how we got here, you had a task force with recommendations just about 2 years ago, and that led to the first conversation about a 70-acre portion of property that the county owns that happens to be immediately adjacent to the Flores Lake State Natural Area, which is one of our larger, I would argue, more important natural areas on the coast. We have several, and some of them are quite popular, places like Akola and Oswald West, and even the Bandon State Natural Area just north of us here, but Flores Lake occupies a special place in that portfolio. Because the department's acquisition budget is really quite limited, it's about 10% of the money that we spend on overall park maintenance and improvements. We proposed, instead of simply purchasing property from the county, that we do a trade. Rebalancing our state park holdings in any county is always important. When we find that there's a willing partner on the other side of that conversation, especially about property ownership, one of our first moves is to look at other properties that have, and state park portfolio that have been evaluated already and might not be as good a fit for the state park system as the property that we might receive. So in 2018, we did visit the property that we're proposing in trade, the Port Orford Cedars Wayside, which is an undeveloped property immediately adjacent to 101, and looked at it in comparison to the Flores Lake adjacent property, the 70 acres currently in county ownership. And after some extensive conversations with the county, present back to you last month a proposal for making this deal go forward. So just in summary, we've gone through all of those steps and have a proposal for your consideration in advance of our commission taking the issue back up. And I'll get to that at the end, sort of what our timeline is here. So just as a reminder, this blue outline is the Flores Lake State Natural Area. Here's Cape Blanco. The yellow area is the area under consideration, the 70 acres of county ownership. And you can see immediately adjacent to the northern end of Flores Lake here. And then we have this small outlying property, the Port Orford Cedar Wayside. Airport Road here, and then you can see 101. The total county ownership in the Flores Lake area is represented by that dashed yellow line there. You can see the 70-acre portion that we're discussing here, and then the Flores Lake State Natural Area, which includes Black Lock Point, one of my favorite places to eat wild strawberries, but that's not on the agenda. So,
You're sure they're strawberries?
That's a really good question. I have no comment on the matter. Let's put it that way. Okay, they tasted like strawberries. As we zoom in, you can see that there are fingers of the lake that spread and surround this 70-acre parcel. We do have other views of this lake that we'll move in on, but about 16%, 14%, somewhere in that range of the property is wetlands. It is fairly difficult to get to. You can see the closest trail, this dashed orange line here, that just skirts the edge of the property. One of the important things that we look at when we're protecting state park properties is buffer land. What can we do to take the recreational opportunity that's being presented by a park and shelter it from change that might happen outside the park? So it is unusual for us to come right up to a boundary with a recreational experience like a trail without at least occasionally considering ways that we can provide a buffer to protect that experience.
Chris, quick question on that last frame. The property immediately north of that buffers you, who owns that property there?
So this is all inside the Flores Lake State Natural Area as well. So that's state park land there. And I don't know the ownership here to the south. A couple of historic views of the property. I'll just skip right on by. You can see aerials from the 60s, aerials from the 70s. We're talking about an area that has survived some of the changes that are affecting other areas of the coast. Really regard this as a worthwhile addition to the state park system. From LIDAR, we can see the extent of wetlands in the area and areas of traditional drainage. This is one of the reasons it's relatively difficult to reach sections of this property, and likewise difficult to develop or extract resources from it. The trail that you see here, if this transaction goes through, we might extend some low-impact trails to reach further into the property. We haven't gotten to the point of studying anything along those lines, but at most what we're talking about here is very low-key, natural-based experiences for recreation to try and leave as much of the natural resource intact as possible. During our site visits, we did notice the kind of attributes that we look for in a state park system: Port Orford cedar, Sitka sedge, in areas that aren't well represented in the state park system portfolio. The kind of natural features that we saw there are similar to what we see in other areas of Flores Lake State Natural Area, but there are also several unusual attributes. Namely, in addition to Sitka sedge living in wetland environments, Port Orford cedar, evergreen huckleberry planted neighborhoods, which that combination of Port Orford cedar and huckleberry is so unusual. It's not represented at all in the State Natural Area Registry. That registry is separate from our department. We happen to manage it, but it has nothing to do with the state park system. It has to do with identifying key specimen representative environments in Oregon and making sure that they're registered and recognized. That helps them attract grant funding for improvements and protections. And that Port Orford cedar huckleberry plant neighborhood is not represented anywhere on that registry. Its attributes are one of the things that attract us to its membership in the state park system. I'm going to flip over to the other property, that outlying property, the Port Orford Cedar Wayside. So here's Airport Road and Highway 101, and then a 34-acre site that was originally intended as similar to one of the many highway waysides that we have up and down 101. A small picnic area, a place to pull out and stretch your legs, enjoy natural forest, even though it is a relatively small property. This property was never developed for any of those purposes. During the 1980s master planning process, the high school immediately across the street was noted as maybe being one of the consumers of this property, being able to use it for environmental clubs or for school outings or whatnot. Those things have sort of come and gone and never really taken off. This magenta outline you see here is an existing county property. You can see we're right across the road with a maintenance shop and then this undeveloped parcel. The aerials show in the 1950s that this was logged. The property has probably been logged 3 times by our guests. Currently has a relatively strong stand of Doug fir, Sitka spruce, Port Orford cedar, and in fact 428,000 board feet currently on the property. And there is wetland here, but the property is much more easily accessible than the Flores Lake property, certainly. That plays into the value that you're going to see here in a second. About 16% of this property also wetlands, compared to the 14% on the 70-acre parcel that the county currently owns. And you can see those marked here. Fortunately, the wetlands are situated in such a way that access to the majority of the property off of either Airport Road or 101 is relatively easy. So just totaling up sort of the differences here, if that county land comes into the state park system, we'll keep it celebrating its natural features. It's got about a mile of lake frontage with wetlands bordering it and sort of cutting it in two. There is only access by informal trails and from the water. In order to review most of this property, we had to put on knee waders and sort of slog through, trying to be as careful as possible with the vegetation. You can see mention of those rare plant communities here: Port Orford cedar, evergreen huckleberry, and Port Orford cedar, Sitka spruce, Pacific rhododendron, shore pine, salal, with evidence of blacklock soils. Those are those shallow clayey soils that you see at the Flores Lake Natural Area that give rise to the beautiful pygmy forest where I captured the frogs yelling at me yesterday with my recording. So for comparison, the state land, while it is smaller, has a few acres of wetland, is much more accessible and a little more simple as far as the plant communities go. Once again, it does have this same very rare association, but it's, lower quality and in general smaller areas. The appraisals, we both used the same independent appraiser, given separate independent instructions. The county land offered, because of its inaccessibility, its usefulness, appraised at $150,000. The 34-acre parcel that is currently in state ownership appraised at $200,000, reflecting its value, its possible use for construction for things like a home, and the timber value. That timber value totaled about $65,000 of that $200,000. So when we look at candidates for the state park system, we do have discrete criteria that we go through. Does it benefit the mission? Does it enhance an existing park? Is there going to be a return on the money, staff time, and cash that we spend to maintain that property? Is it just generally feasible for us to manage that property? Is there a compelling opportunity here? Is there local support? Does it match any element of an existing master plan, and how will it affect the community? As you can see on most of those questions, this property hits the right chords with us. The county property does. Provides a buffer for the Oregon Coast Trail and other portions of the Flores Lake, the existing Flores Lake property. There's good public support, and it matches our recreation mission, quite frankly, much more so than the existing Port Orford property does. We do have the issue of the difference in appraised values, however. While there's no hard and fast rules about that, the direction from our commission is to do a little more to balance those values out. The property that the state currently manages, the Port Orford Cedar, is worth $50,000 more according to that appraisal than the Flores Lake property. Rather than let that stop us, staff went to work and came up with two alternatives here. The first is the most direct and the easiest to measure, is instead of a 70-acre transfer from the county, let's make it a 90. It doesn't get us all the way to $200,000. We land about $8,000 short. However, we both have permission, you as the county and we as the state, to ignore that. As long as there's public interest involved, we can move forward as long as we're in agreement that it's important to move forward. And that 20 acres extra, I'll show you on a map visually so we get a better sense of that. Alternative 2 is, in addition to that 70 acres that the county first offered, place a conservation easement on 90 acres immediately to the east. That is a little more complicated. When we get to the map, you'll see exactly what kind of territory we're talking about here, but we don't have a value for that conservation easement yet. Conservation easements are valued based on the exact nature of the conservation easement. What are we talking about? Well, how does that, the county would retain ownership, but they'd be limited in what further actions they could take on the property. What are those limitations? The stronger the limitations, the higher the value. The weaker the limitations, the lower the value. And that would frankly take more work, more conversation, and require, I think, probably more time. So there's just some citations there, mainly so the lawyers don't fall asleep, that explain where the authority comes from to accept less than the appraised value. So I want to bring us back to that map, and it says private cranberry farm. So the other question of who that is, thank you, C1 Farms. So what we're talking about with alternative 1 is to take the 70 acres and add this 20 acres to it. has a couple of benefits. Major one is that it protects both visually and practically all sides of this peninsula here, and adds just enough that we feel like we could, as an agency, do a good job managing it. And one of the reasons we're not interested at this time in looking at an entire property, many times the size of this 70 acres, is because we have our own capacity issues. You know, we have staff, we have funding, and taking on more than we feel we can be a good steward of wouldn't be responsible. So the 70-acre parcel plus this 20 falls well within the capabilities of our staff and our current resources. There are, you can see here, roads platted, not developed, but platted. And in addition to transferring this 20 acres plus that 70 for a total of 90 acres, we'd like the county to consider abandoning those roads and removing them from the plans there. So that's alternative one, and frankly, it's direct, it's simple, it's something that we could act on relatively efficiently, and while we would accept either of these two, if the county's amenable, this is the one that we prefer by a slight margin. So the second option is, in addition to that 70 acres, add a conservation easement on a 90-acre section here immediately to the east. So it would,
an additional 90 acres.
yes, right. So this 70 come into state ownership, and then on this 90-acre parcel, which would stay in county ownership and be encumbered by a conservation easement. There are outlined in purple here 4 in-holdings that make that kind of option a little more complicated. It's not insurmountable, it's still feasible. We as state park staff would write up the terms of a conservation easement to start the discussion. They could certainly be edited, be modified to suit county needs, but this in theory would add just enough value to give comfort to our commission that we're being balanced in our relationship. Yes,
Commissioner Gold?
I just have a couple of questions about this option 2. With this conservation easement, would the county be responsible for maintaining that? And also, would we have liability issues because of that?
Yeah. Excellent questions. So enforcement of the easement's terms are generally written into the easement. Our responsibility as the owner of the easement is to manage the relationship. But yes, there would be additional burden on the county to comply with the terms of that easement. That's one of the reasons, while it's a valuable tool in many situations to get public benefit without having the state to own additional property, it is more complicated. And there is a greater burden afterward to make sure that everyone's following the rules. Absolutely true.
And a legal aspect as well.
Very much so, yes, sir.
Okay.
But it is an option that balances the values. So, you know, like I said, happy with both. Prefer the first one for its simplicity, but if this is where you fall down, that this is where you're most comfortable, we'll go to work and draw up terms so that you have something more to react to. There is a timing consideration here that I'll get to, though. And these 4 private in-holdings, the 20 acres that we would have added here, avoid all of them. It just sort of gets us a chunk right in here to add to that 70 under alternative 1. So, as a reminder, here's the 70 acres that the county is offering. This is the rest of the county ownership. And then the alternatives differ by either just taking another 20 acres here for that section or adding basically a big 90-acre chunk here to that 70 acres for a conservation easement. You can see the 2 options side by side here. Additional 20 acres outright, additional 90 acres easement. So what we're looking for is ideally action from you as a commission. We have a State Parks Commission meeting on April 17th and another one in June. In our ideal world, we work out one of those 2 options down to enough detail that we can take it back to our commission on April 17th and present it to them as an information item only to say, here's how the county feels, here's the follow-up from staff to draw up something that's much closer to actual terms of a sale, get permission from our commission to pursue it, and then bring it back to them in June for a final action saying, yes, we approve this transfer, and we go to work to actually make it happen and start bringing these Port Orford Cedar property into county ownership for whatever you're going to do with it, and the Flores Lake property into state ownership to become part of the park. So while this isn't our only opportunity to address this, we're in a good time here. That you've heard several times from us and from the community and from staff. It seems like we're in a really good moment where there's a rhythm of communication coming back and forth that's constructive. And we have an opportunity here to show that we can have those conversations, button this up, and move on to the next set of conversations. And I do want to emphasize here that we have a long tradition of investment in this county for state parks and in relationship with county government. This transfer is yet another road mark on that path toward even greater cooperation, and it is not the final destination. If we get this to go through, the next step will not be everybody going back to the corners and doing work on their properties. It will be to launch into a deeper conversation about cooperation with the county and looking at properties and the way our portfolio meshes with yours and what kind of cooperation we can have on other properties, including the possibility of transfers. That's the next step here. This isn't the end. So with that, happy to answer any other questions you've got.
Chris, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I believe this board will be seated for 22 more months at its current and the current seats. If we were to, and I'm not saying we're putting it off 22 months, but if we were to push this off, what would be the next timeline? I know you mentioned April and June. What would be the next timeline, probably?
Our commission meets 5 times a year. So the next meeting, we take the summer off because everybody's working. So the next meeting after that would be September. And then again,
the initial? And then the final would be, what, another month after that?
Yeah, November would be the next meeting after that. I know the iron is hot, but like I say, this isn't a deadline. It's just an opportunity for progress. So yes, if we miss April, June, the possibility is we do June and September, for instance, just shift everything back one. But there are opportunities. Both our own staff working on acquisitions elsewhere in the state and working with other partners. We've got work in Lynn County right now that's heating up pretty much, and one of the things we're trying to do here is strike while we've got staff capacity and there's plenty of work has been produced that you can consider. So
another question I have, as many people here may or may not know, I am definitely for conservation. I'm definitely for preserving what little ground we have left. My ranch is under a complete conservation easement to protect it in perpetuity. My question on this is, because I know what it took to get my ranch conserved, who arrived at the $90,000 or the $50,000 number for an additional 90 acres, and how did they do that?
So the
It
difference
seems like
in
it's
values,
rather minimal to me.
the difference in values came about from the appraisals.
Okay.
So
was it the same appraisal?
Same
company?
appraiser, that's correct.
Okay. Ms. Schmelzer, do you have?
Just a clarification. On the parcel, the Wayside parcel, you said the value was $200,000 and 65 of that was the timber. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. Yep.
Okay, so the value on that one is 135.
The non-timber value is about 135. Yep.
And that's standing timber. That's not mill timber. At mill site, that's standing timber value.
I don't know the answer to that question. No.
Okay.
So I know that it's
Neither
about
does
430,000 board feet. So that value is going to change depending on the market.
Right. Well, it would also change it. What it costs to get it on the ground, limbed, and get it to the mill site.
Yeah, there were percentages in there that reduced those figures down, and I didn't understand them at the time, but it seems to me that the value by the time you get through waste and limbing and getting trees down to the right dimensions, all of that was taken into account from what I can see.
Okay. Commissioner Gold?
I just kind of have a question. I think ecotourism in this county could be great because of the scenic, wonderful, beautiful lands that we have, and I think that could be one area. I know our Flores Lake Boys Park is very successful, and I could see this being a real plus. And I don't know why we are putting this off. Is it because we don't know what the land would be worth by the high school on the 101 property, or just curious? There seems to be
I don't know that anyone said we're putting anything off as of this moment.
It kind of felt like that, so.
Commissioner Boyce?
You know, the Oregon State Park is a tremendous source of pride for a lot of people, and thank you on that. I sure can't take any credit, but I know a lot of people that work very hard. You have some wonderful folks here, and
appreciate that.
Casey Nielsen, and you know, obviously Ms. Devereaux has spent a lot of time on this. You said something interesting to me that I picked up on, well, several things, but your long-term vision and the work in this part of the state. You mentioned Bandon. You certainly, thank goodness, highlighted the diversity in that area. You mentioned putting on waders, and I can understand what you're up against there. I am very interested in trail development in that program, and I know that, like most state government agencies, there's always funding issues. But I'm trying to tie this into the other 500 acres in the long-term outlook, the relationship you have with the counties that your people have built, and I think certainly to some extent our folks have. Tying that all in together over a period of time, I think would give us a lot of hope that we're all on the same page. And I don't know how much the county can help, but we would certainly be consistent and determined in that effort. So I want you, maybe if you could, speak just a little more on the Oregon State Park's long-term vision there and what you might see for this property. And I might even make it on kind of a condition, and I'll recommend a schedule here in a minute for how we might proceed on this. Thanks. Long question, Mr. Havel.
No, that's quite all right. And I really do appreciate that. The state park system has never existed in isolation. From its very beginning in 1922, it was about the way people in Oregon connect with the landscape. And we're not the only player in that regard. So right up through the 50s, state park development really wasn't about the state coming in and developing. It was about what kind of relationship can we have with people on the ground. Frankly, this is a big secret, so you have to promise not to tell anybody. There really weren't even state park dedicated workers in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. It was people inside the Department of Transportation going around and borrowing time from highway maintenance crews and from county crews to say, hey, can you help us with this particular site? That legacy of relating to people on the ground is with us even today. Sometimes we do forget it. Sometimes we think, you know, state parks in some cases are really big and famous and popular. We don't need local relationships. Where those attitudes pop up, we get on top of them. So the need for working with a county, with a city, with a port to say we've got trails that people use for the experience that they provide. They don't care what ground they're on. All they know is that they're getting this really powerful personal experience, and they want governments to work together to provide it. So when we talk about the future of Flores Lake, we're really talking about the future of the human connection to the landscape in Curry County. And that cannot be done with state parks alone saying, where's my trail going to go? My trail? Where's our trail going to go? So we've got opportunity anchored by Cape Blanco south of Flores Lake. We've got an opportunity anchored by Boyce Cove at the north end. How do those things relate, and how can they provide a unified experience? It's that conversation that we need to have in order to maintain our viability as a state park system, because we don't float alone. We absolutely do not. Our region manager, Dennis Comfort, out of the Seal Rock office, is ready and eager to have these longer term conversations about how we connect people with the Oregon landscape in a way that produces a powerful experience. Long-term vision, we know that one of the key barriers to us succeeding with parklands is sustainability. What are the changes in wildfire patterns? What are the changes in ocean energy? What are the changes in invasive species and things like sudden oak death? And knowing that no one of us is powerful enough to address those challenges on our own, the conversation about sustainability usually turns to who are our partners? How can we combine our resources in a way that tackles these challenges? That's not just the next step in Curry County, that's our next step statewide. And addressing the things that could threaten the future of human connection to the landscape, that's what's driving the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department right now. So, maybe that came close to answering your question.
You mentioned Dennis Comfort. We're trying to get him to move to this end of the state. We're lobbying him. To be.
Yeah.
So, back to
so far as I know, nobody's broken that news to him yet. But.
Okay. Yes, he knows.
Okay.
He knows. Back to the trails. Any long-term development, has that even been part of the commission's plan to look at this over time and see how you might access that and develop those trails? So and how that might also transcend into the other 500 acres, and how we might be able to connect there as well.
Yeah, so there's no current action at the commission that addresses trails planning. There are statewide trails plans that the commission has adopted that have general goals in them about providing connectivity between residential areas and rural trail experiences. Those things are very general. The master plan for this area is due for an update, and those updates, which include things like trails plans and working with adjacent jurisdictions, generally get triggered when there's a change in property ownership. So we've acquired land between Cape Blanco and Flores Lake, and if this transfer goes through, it's another acquisition that comes closer to triggering an update on that master plan. It's in the master planning process that we address things like, are the soils suitable? How do trails interfere with other natural values? What's the recreation demand? And what kind of facilities support do we have outside of the state park system that improve that experience? So while this park is not on the master planning schedule yet, I can say that movement on acquisitions and land ownership generally lights a fire under the planning calendar crew so that they can start scheduling these things for updates. The current plan for trails in this park that's been approved at the state and county levels doesn't include any trail work in that area. Because it was planned with the current land holdings in place. As land holdings change, trails plans change, and that compels a need for new master plans. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would just like to make that part of this program that we put on the table, what you've put on the table and identified here and showed to everyone in the county, and which is part of the whole nuance here. You heard a little bit of frustration from different public testimony today. This has been going on for 10 years.
Yeah, right.
And so you even diplomatically handled that quite well. Mr. Chair, what I would like, I don't want to end the discussion here because I have a couple other things, but if we're in the interest of time, we have a meeting on June 5th. And they have their bi-monthly or 5 a year that your commission meets on the 12th. That would give them 90 days. Plus 90 days for us to work toward, maybe even within a week or so, refining what I think we need to add to the negotiations here as far as a 5-year plan to develop the trails. I think asking a solid commitment that you would actually do that anytime soon is probably unrealistic, but I would really like to have that on the plan. And then back to your reference as far as the other 500 acres. And if we ever do make additional trades, it doesn't necessarily have to be within Curry County for that 500 acres. And so I'm looking pretty long-term there, maybe a little bit too far out ahead, but I think that's the obligation we have to the citizens here. And, some people say, yeah, that 20 acres is only worth $150,000. You've got to be kidding. I'm not an appraisal, but I think it is reasonable, and I just really want to thank you and your staff for great work here. One more thing on, you mentioned trails, you mentioned roads. Even though they're platted, they're not really open. Anytime I hear of roads being closed in Curry County in deep forested areas, my antennas go up with the concern for raising the level of fire danger. And so as long as I'm on this board, I'm going to be working with you and anybody and everybody I can within the county, because I think we're at great risk here. And the last 2 years certainly have bared that reality. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. June 5th, if we can. Thank you again, Mr. Havel.
I think some of my concerns are this. I've spoken with some people up in the Port Orford area before I was elected, and I voiced my, I don't want to say opinions, but my thoughts on what I felt. And one of the first things actually that Commissioner Boyce ever invited me to do was to sit in on a meeting, I'm going to say about a year ago, on the trails that are through Oregon and the areas that needed to be finished to be completed. So I kind of really took that and looked at it, and I appreciate the work that's been done on this, but I'd like to see a finality to it as well. I'd like to see that trail be completed all the way through the state of Oregon. And I think this might be a place that we could still sit and negotiate some on this, because I think that there's the good places for our kids to go are dwindling. And I think that we as in Curry County have an opportunity to help protect that even more. The structure of this isn't going to change in the next couple of months, and I know some may leave here frustrated that we may not get this done today. But I will say this, I think you have a board that is seated now that I believe will be seated for at least another 22 months that is interested in finally getting whatever is going to come of this done. I would like to look at the appraisal again. I'll say this flat out, I may like to see another appraisal on it done. I would also like to speak with you more, Chris, and negotiate a little bit more on this, because I think there's a little bit, hopefully a little more take for the county and a little more give from the parks on some of this. So I'd like to get, of course, as much for the county as we can out of this fairly, without delaying it and just kicking the can down the road. But I do agree with Commissioner Boyce that I would like to see this move down the road a little bit farther. I'd like to actually go and visit this, and I know I'd spoken to you last fall about this, and I was going to try and get out there, but the weather, winter. Now that spring is almost here, I'd like to actually go walk this some and walk the other property as well, and just make sure we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges here. And
sure.
And I hope people don't take this as a delay tactic, because it's really not. I would hope that everyone in this room and anyone going to watch this on television would just say, you know what, these people really care about what we're trying to do here, and they want to make sure that they're making a fully informed decision. That's my thoughts.
I like the idea of trails, and I think that could be of benefit to the county as far as our Boyce Cove Park, giving those folks a little extra to do. So I'm in favor, simply because of that, of putting it off a little bit to negotiate. So I think that's a good idea.
Okay. So,
but I don't want it to go away.
Oh, absolutely.
Can I ask
Schmelzer?
some questions?
Sure.
Chris, I just have 2 questions for you. So going back to that task force that was looking at getting rid of or trying to decrease the number of properties that the county owns, we talked about a land swap because we wanted to decrease our ownership. This doesn't really help us with that. I mean, we're still retaining quite a bit of property through both of these proposals. We also at that time had looked at hoping to get some more valuable property, something that would be of greater interest to us than a wayside we could just log. So what happened to, in the meantime, because I've been gone a couple of years and we haven't had these discussions, but what happened to other proposals or ideas to swap with different properties the county was interested in?
So thank you for that question, and it gets to I think the thing I was trying to express at the end. Taking 90 acres from county ownership and moving it over to state parks. The 70 that was originally proposed, plus the 20 that balances the values. There's some benefit to that, and it's a relatively straightforward transaction. But I do view that as the first date, if you will. That we're entering into a longer relationship that's going to require some heartfelt conversations, some longer term vision, some coupling of interests. And getting this one deal done, it's not that it proves that we can work together, but I guess in a way it does. That we know that there's a larger issue here, looking at all the state park properties in the county and all the county ownership, and talking about how our missions overlap and how we can do the right thing for not just the people of Curry County, but the people of the state. And that's the interest that we have to represent as well, is not just the local interest, but that broader interest. Those are complicated discussions. And without giving up on something that's real and immediate and that we can move forward on, we want to have those larger discussions. But it seems, frankly, a shame to turn away from something that's immediate, that's real, that we can actually work on in the here and now in order to have that longer discussion. I guess I don't see why we have to choose. We would rather get that deal done and say, yeah, we can do this. It works, and it's going to be a message to other counties that it works too. Now let's move on to that longer discussion, and frankly, that's going to take some time and be even more complicated than this one deal. But let's do it, right?
I'd like to say, though, that I think it might be a good time now, sooner than later. Let's go ahead and sit at a table and let's get all of our cards out on the table and see exactly where we are with everything and what we have interests in, whether it be, which I personally would not agree with the easement part of this.
Sure.
Again, having an easement on my property and the liability that opens me up to, I don't know if the county would be ready for that kind of a liability.
We don't have the money.
So, I think it might be a good time for all of us to sit at a table, and like Ms. Schmelzer said, there were other properties that we may have had interest in that we could maybe negotiate with, and again, try and make the best deal that we can for the county. And I don't know what your schedule is, Chris, or the resources that you would need to pull together to have that meeting, but I would certainly like to do that as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that staff time and attention does come and go, which is why we were gratified to see how far along this one proposal was. It seems well within reach, and let's not stop there. But it's certainly, of course, up to you entirely. But our preference is to see this get done so that we can move on to those larger discussions without maybe losing members of our commission, or maybe sending the message that any kind of deal might be more complicated.
Right.
We always run that risk that staff who do have to work statewide might get seized by some other opportunity, and then we lose some time and attention on this, and I think that would be tragic.
Okay. So, Commissioner Boyce?
I'm going to take just a little different approach, and I communicated a minute ago. I would be, right now as it stands, in opposition to any more meetings because of, you just mentioned the risk, and I'm willing to take that risk now because of the amount of years that's been involved. And I'm going to suggest that we have that meeting on June 5th. We do our best to be able to make a decision on that date, but direct staff to come up with a couple different things that we can put on the table that we are comfortable is good for the state and the county citizens, and get that to you as quickly as we can so that you can get that to your staffs and commission and see what happens if we're able to actually make that vote on June 5th. That's less than 90 days. I think that's a good direction to go, and I can put it in the form of a motion if you like, Mr. Chair, or just keep the discussion going. It's a very good discussion, which I'm grateful for.
I know we're up against, I don't mean to interrupt you there, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're up against time. There were a couple people in the audience that were not able to be here sooner that I would like to hear their comments, so.
Former Commissioner Reagan and
yes,
Mark Furman.
There we go.
We're going to get tagged.
We're going to kind of limit it to that, so those comments will be about the limit.
Yeah, this will be very brief. Mark Furwick, Old Beach. The Forest Lake area is, of course, very special, and I'm not going to repeat any of the good information we just got, but one of the reasons it's really special to me is taking our son there fishing when he was in high school, and being able to get in a boat and go across the lake to the area in question. No houses. You can spend the whole day back there without seeing a house, and that's something that's just very rare now, and we have a obligation to keep it that way, I believe, and it's something that money cannot buy. And anyway, I am definitely in favor of the land swap. Either one. I suppose number one would be my choice, just so we could move it along as fast as possible. And I thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Commissioner?
Still is funny to hear that title. Peg Regan, Gold Beach. I first became aware of this issue back in the early 90s when I was a county commissioner, and there was a proposal to turn this land into a county forest like Coos County has and generate some revenue for the county. That was dropped as there isn't enough timber to warrant that. Since then, the county has considered, I don't know how many proposals to do something, somehow utilize this land, generate some revenue. Every time, after some analysis, it's been rejected, but every time it required a lot of energy, both from the citizens and from the board and staff. This is the closest that we've come to an actual resolution of even a portion of the property. And I urge you to support this proposal. Don't start over again. Don't put the county residents who care about this issue through all this again. Don't put yourselves, who've been through this before, through all this again. If you really want to start from scratch, at least let this proposal go through and then start from scratch with the land that isn't part of it, the land that's remaining. We are also working on a conservation easement on our property, our 160 acres of forest land, and we've been working on it for years. Regarding the two proposals, I think it's in the county's best interest to go with alternative one, but I would support either option. I came here prepared to say I hope you'll make a decision today. It sounds like that's not going to happen, so I'm sorry to hear that. But I hope that you will explain to the public and keep us informed as to what the process is going to be to resolve this and how and when you're going to do it. And then what happens after that. But again, I urge you to support this transfer. Thank you.
I guess my final comment on that would be that my final comment on that would be that I would hope that everyone here is knowing that we're looking to make the right deal for everyone involved. Like I said, to push this out another month or 2, 3 months is not going to change any of the issues it has. One of the questions that I see on this that you just mentioned is, it's basically a lot of the land that we would be giving up is the frontage land for the lake. So the frontage land for the lake would be at an absolute minimum with this particular, with the easement part of it anyway. So there are, in my opinion, there are still some things to discuss on this, and that I would like to at least take a minimum of time to do. So, Commissioner Boyce, did you have a motion?
Yes, just one more quick comment. This is not like working with the state parks is not like working with the DEQ. Forgive me. So I mentioned no other meetings, but we can direct staff. I'm only interested personally in alternative 2 at this point, because I think we're making a little bit of a risk. I think state parks is making a little bit of a risk. This gives us a great opportunity.
I would
make a motion. What's that?
Alternative 2 is the one with the 90 acres of easement as well?
No, it's just the 70 acres.
The easement.
No, that's with the easement.
Alternative 2 is 70 acres plus a 90 acre easement. Alternative 1 is 70 acres plus 20 acres ownership. So alternative 1 here up on the screen.
And I'm not going to have a preference on alternatives, but we're going to come back with something on the table. I recommend, Mr. Chair, that has a good chance of getting public support. When Mr. Palmer said this has overwhelming support, or overwhelming support, yes, that's an understatement. It's also a chance to bring the county together. North and south, there's probably 90% of our people in the county, South County, that have never had an opportunity to come up here, and boy, I know you've been there now, and it is sensational. So we'll drive a hard bargain, but so will you, and I think we've got a chance to move ahead here, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Was that a good enough motion?
I didn't hear a motion.
Okay.
I heard a lot of statement.
Would you write that? No, I'm sorry. So I make a motion to direct staff to set up a meeting for June 5th, which of course is a Wednesday, and to look at how we might modify the alternatives, one or two. We certainly have a wonderful email list from folks all over the county, but primarily North County. Obviously, we would include those, and you mentioned that earlier today. So the motion is to direct staff to respond off of the work we've seen today, the public testimony we've had, and just amend that slightly or however we want, and go forward.
Okay, can we add to that motion also that we direct staff to look to the Parks Department as well to repopulate that list of properties?
Yes. What about having action on this item June 5th? Should that be added to the motion? Because I think we've kicked this can down quite
Well,
a
I
ways.
think let's see. I think let's see what happens.
Yeah, that was part of my motion, to come up with a decision so they could have it available a week ahead of time for their...
Okay, so you want to have it as an action item for June 5th?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Call for the roll.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right. At this time, we're going to take our lunch break. We will meet back here at 1 o'clock.
I thought it was 2 for the workshop.
We're not done with the regular meeting yet.
Oh,
Great
thank you.
proposal. I'm going to watch.
Okay, dig in.
All right, we are back in session. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, 13th of March. Moving forward on our next action item is B, program to help ranchers and farmers get compensation for wolf damage. Mr. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One part of this that...
Speak right up.
Charles?
Got it.
7.
Was he not ready? Well,
I think it's 7B.
Yes.
Here we go. Just scrolling down to the contract requirements for serving on this committee. Wolf Advisory, do I need to give some outline or general?
It might do good to give some general outline as to why we're looking at this.
We have our first, Curry County has its first, probably well over 100 years, very likely to be confirmed. As I talk to people in the state, they're holding their cards so close to the vest. I honestly thought that this was a dog kill in northern Curry County. Now I don't have that opinion almost without, yeah. And so this is a serious problem for our community, for our county, for our ranchers, our farmers. Sometimes wolves will go 50, even 75 miles a day. This is part of a federal government plan that they put into place back in the mid-90s. And to show you what we're up against and how it relates to federal forest land management, how it relates to wildlife management, here's just one quick sentence from I think it's 94, yes. The Northern Rockies Wolf Recovery Plan, the 1994 Environmental Impact Statement. How much impact have wolves had on big game populations, plural, populations? Just the northern Yellowstone elk herd alone went from 20,000 animals in 1996 to fewer than 4,000 in 2012. Just, you know, kind of orienting the public here. State confirms third wolf attack on Jackson County Ranch this month. That was in January, a year and 2 months ago, 2018. Wolves expected to make their move to Southwest Oregon, April 2017. This is all easy to Google. Wolf kills calf on Jackson County Ranch. 2018. Mr. Chair, I've been speaking out against this and trying to responsibly notify the public that this is coming. I just don't think any of us expected it to be here this quick. And even if it does somehow miraculously prove to be non-wolf related, the predators are, with a cougar population by their own admission of the Oregon Fish and Game, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, excuse me, we have twice the number of cougars that our Oregon habitat can handle. And so when you talk to the Eastern Oregon commissioners, their food source is drying up. And so now we have another predator come into Curry County, into Oregon, and you saw my forest management letter that I sent out challenging the rest of the state. It was the middle of January. I said, no wolves, please, west of the Cascades. And here we are, 2 months later, caught off guard. So for our ranchers to be able to get, I mean, this is just an issue that, if anything, keeps me up at night, more so than the threat of a third consecutive wildfire season with catastrophic fires. It is this issue. These are not even native to Southern Oregon. They are a Canadian wolf that is bigger, more aggressive, and basically eliminated the true wolves in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho over that same 20-year period, 1994 to 2015, give or take. And so one very interested citizen wrote this, and if I may, just so the public understands, it is said that if it doesn't learn from your mistakes, will be certainly be condemned to repeating them. The application of this principle to the current discussion regarding wolves revolves around the more recent manipulation of wildlife regulations to encourage the success of cougars. Cougars, by the way, are not considered through the Oregon State Fish and Game to be fish and wildlife. Apologize again. They're a big game animal. They're not even considered a predator, but a wolf is a predator. The dramatic impact on the cervid populations, which is of course your deer and elk, have been apparent and has been quantified. If memory serves me correctly, the state of Oregon recently released information that placed the population of cougars around 6,000. And so just cutting a few sentences out here, that's 300,000 deer per year to take care of just the cougar population. It has nothing to do with the wolves. And we can't get good numbers, all the commissioners combined, especially in Eastern Oregon, because it's such an issue there. We're not exactly sure how many wolves are actually in the state of Oregon right now. There's some reasonable estimates. Less apparent are the ramifications of the vegetation control contributions resulting from the feeding habits of cervids as it relates to suppression of flash fuels or more remote areas. In our more remote areas, if certain individuals are correct in repeating the mantra that plantations burn like gasoline, reforested areas, then it should be a valid corollary that grass and other annual vegetative growth burn like gasoline on steroids. There's no plantations in the interior protected wilderness area where our catastrophic wildfires all originate, but there is an unending supply of grass and other fine fuels which are annually sun-dried and waiting for the next lightning origin wildfire. So yes, biscuit, silver, Klondike, granite, Chetco bar, all started in the wilderness, not on plantations, not on reforested, replanted, reprod areas. Again, reforestation. So when we don't know what these two incredible predators are going to have for food sources when all the deer and elk are gone. And so they're going to do what they are doing now, and that's go to the ranchers. And so we can help our local ranchers get compensation. And the requirement is an wolf advisory committee. We have recommended, or I don't know if it came from our office or if Coos County suggested to the Farm Bureau that we combine our two counties and have one committee. The only thing I didn't like was on this one that we wrote, and I'm not sure where we got this. I'm also working with Susan Roberts of Wallowa County. They've been through this for 3 or 4 years now. The committee will consist of 7 members. 1 member shall be a Curry County Commissioner. 2 members shall own or manage livestock. 2 members shall support wolf conservation or coexistence with wolves. This is what we're recommending today, that we take a look at authorizing or approving. So the only question I have, Mr. Chair, and maybe Director Schmelzer, is where that came from, and if that is, if a 7-member requirement would be the same for both counties.
So the model that you have in front of you was taken from the Jackson County model because we had to find one in the area that actually has an advisory.
They're the only ones done so far in our,
Right,
in our
there's
region.
not many in our region at all. So they've done one, and it was actually Planning Director Crockett that has a relationship with the Farm Bureau and said the Farm Bureau would actually be interested in representing both counties together, which would, of course, help us so we don't have to have another committee and manage another committee, but instead have the Farm Bureau manage the program for us. Without a committee, whether it be one specific to Curry or a joint one with Coos, without that committee, the rancher cannot get compensation for the wolf damage. So, should there be wolf damage. So, you do have, I did send you a draft letter that we could send to to the Department of Ag. Ms. Crockett had actually put together the draft letter, which would basically ask the state to allow us to have a joint committee with Coos County. Otherwise, the other option you have before you is to do our own committee with the own ordinances. So you have 2 drafts in front of you. Either follow the ordinance or submit a letter to try and do a joint committee. And Becky's here if you have questions on it.
One moment. Go ahead, Ms. Crockett.
Thanks. I was asked by the Coos Curry Farm Bureau to come and ask the commissioners here in Curry County if they would join the folks in Coos County to have a joint committee. Our original thought is to have the Coos Curry Farm Bureau be that committee. However, it's state statute that dictates what kind of committee you have to have and how many members are on it in order to get compensation from wolf damage. That's ORS 610.150. And it calls for a 7-member committee. And thus the letter to the Department of Agriculture, who essentially administers the wolf program, we could add a sentence in there asking for a larger committee with our request to have combined committees, because that does seem appropriate to have more members than just 7 if you're representing 2 counties. But right now, the committee structure is actually dictated by statute and administrative rule.
Is that, if I may, is that federal or state?
It's state.
ODA.
Yeah, it's ODA. And the director of the Department of Agriculture should have the ability to allow us some leniency.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add one thing. There are actually confirmed wolf kills now in Jackson County. There was one in January 18th, 2019, and another one January 1, 2019. So they're here.
Yeah, I was trying not to spend too much time on that, but I was aware of that. And go ahead, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Commissioner Gold was next.
I just wondered, would you suggest that we do this because it's more efficient and just able to get in there and get it done? Because I know this is probably a wolf, but they don't know for sure. They've got some cameras sitting there checking to see whether that is in fact true. And of course, I would think the farmers cannot be compensated unless they can verify that that's what happened.
Exactly. The thought about having a combined committee came out of the Farm Bureau, Coos Curry Farm Bureau. We've met for years on a regular basis. A lot of these farmers where the wolf or wolves seem to be focused on are joint farms. They go both sides of the counties. They're in Curry County, Coos County. It's the same farmers. So to have farmers that are getting hit by wolves have to sit on 2 different committees or keep up with 2 different committees seems like a stretch of their resources.
I do just want to...
Commissioner Boyce was next.
Don't leave.
Go ahead. You were next.
No, go ahead. I think my question just got answered there.
I just wanted to make a clarification to Commissioner Gold's comment that they can get compensated whether it's confirmed or probable. So if it's probable, they can still get compensated.
Thank you.
David Barnes has a comment, please.
Ms. Crockett, can you, do you have an opinion? I won't ask for your opinion now, because I know you're a rancher, and I know you spent some time on this. We were at the Farm Bureau meeting, what, 6 months ago, or whenever that was. It wasn't even an issue then, was it? Or, you know, during that meeting?
No, the first time it popped up it was about 3 months ago, and I think there was a suspected wolf around the Pistol River area, and that's when it first popped up.
We might bring you back up. Thanks for the work.
David Barnes?
Thank you, David Barnes. I just, the report's over in Jackson. I've read the studies, I've looked at the paperwork, and there's a known wolf pack that's well established over by this farm in Jackson that suffered the losses back in January. The pack has been there for a number of years now. Some of them have moved east, some of them have moved back north again, but from what I was reading on the ODF&W website, they had not moved back this way again, or yet. I keep livestock. I've lost livestock to predation. I had bears come through when I was beekeeping back east and destroyed my hives 2 years in a row. It cost me thousands of dollars. But the state of New Jersey stepped up, and I reported it to them, and I got a check in the mail for a part. I didn't even apply for it. They just sent me a check for my losses. I believe that something needs to be done to compensate people when it comes to predation. But I don't know that, right now I don't see the emergency status of this. It seems like this panel uses the emergency status to put a lot of things in place, and I question the true emergency behind this, given that it's not even confirmed. But that being said, if you are going to put this panel together, I have my application to be on it. I am both a livestock owner and I have suffered predation loss, and I'm a conservationist who believes in that wolves and us can coexist. I don't think that this, Commissioner Boyce, I'm sorry, but given your prejudice towards wolves and your statements in the past of eradicating them east of or west of the Cascades and in all of southern Oregon, I don't think that that's a proper person to be on a panel like this.
So you think
this
we
is
can
about
live
coexistence.
Okay, you think we can live in coexistence with wolves?
I certainly do.
And, okay, so you said that this board is quick sometimes to put into place emergency measures. Do you have some examples of that where we have been maybe a little bit premature or too quick on that?
The last meeting when you had when Mr. Huddle wrote an ordinance during his lunch break and came back and you passed it an hour and a half later in order to, an emergency ordinance so that you could put advisory questions on a ballot. That's not an emergency. There's nothing emergency about that. So
we've been working on that particular issue for a year, or actually more than that. You think that was reactive?
Very much so. Okay. All of a sudden Commissioner Gold came into the meeting and informed you at the last meeting that in order to put advisory questions on, I believe it was you, Commissioner Gold, you had done some research and said that before you could do that, there needed to be an ordinance in place. 2 hours later, the attorney had written up an ordinance, and with no public comment, with no public hearing, it was passed as an emergency measure.
And I'm thankful it was. Thank you.
And I disagree with it, and I think it makes a mockery of it. So, but if you do this, here's my application. Thank you.
I actually think I'd fit into this committee pretty well myself. I'm a commissioner. I'm a member, and I own and manage livestock, and I have business interest in the county. So I might have interest in that. I personally, I don't know if this is an emergency either. I will say this, though. I would rather be proactive than reactive on these kind of things. Having things in place before we have absolute proof, I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. I will say this, at the NACO meetings, we had 30 commissioners from Oregon there, and I would probably say we had a meeting on this exact subject, and I'm estimating here 20 of the 30 had confirmed wolf kills in their counties. I think the evidence here is pretty strong that it is probably more probable than not that this is a wolf kill. And I too have predation. I just lost a calf. We're still looking for him. We can't find him. And we don't know if it's a cougar, if it's a wolf, if it's just got caught in a fence in a ravine somewhere, but I've got a missing cow right now myself. So again, I would rather be proactive on this kind of thing than reactive. So that's my thoughts. Commissioner Gold?
I agree with you there. I think we should be proactive. I'm not looking at this as an emergency, but just a just-in-case type of thing.
So,
well,
I would find support in it.
If your rancher just lost 23 sheep, then it might be an emergency.
Well, and the thing was, one of the things they talked about in NACO is wolves, as well as lion or cougars. They train their babies to kill on like a herd of sheep or a herd of like cow-calf pairs in the field. They'll train their babies to go hit the calf.
Well, these were...
And then, you know, okay, do it again, and they'll kill 8 or 10 of them just to practice, so the mother sees their children learning how to kill, and then they walk away. You know, they may eat one, but they'll walk away and leave the rest. And that's what the thinking was at the NACO meetings about that herd of sheep, was that, because there was also a herd of elk, of young elk that were killed, and I think there was 60 young elk that were killed in a period of a month or so. And it was the same thing. They felt like the parents were teaching their children to how to properly kill. So I think, you know, to have this already in place to protect ranchers and farmers in the counties, it's good.
We understand, though, does this board agree that we are losing, whether we have wolves or not, we are losing the deer and the elk populations by dramatic numbers, and what the consequences unintended, I mean, to try and measure that, we are losing our deer and elk, and that is that just brings so much risk for as deep a timber as we have, and I'm just real concerned it could put some of our ranchers out of business. So no, maybe I better not serve on the commission, because I don't believe we can coexist, not in the kind of environment we have here in Curry County. We're bringing people, spending thousands of dollars, bringing visitors to our area. Well, you want to talk about bad publicity, if that... You know,
I will say also that I saw the numbers that I think you spoke of about the amount of elk that it takes for just the cougars in Oregon, that what they eat every year, and what they eat in this county, and to introduce another predator into that, I think would be detrimental to the coexistence of elk and deer populations in the county. There was something more I wanted to say, but it's gone.
Well, just real quick, I would encourage anybody to do their research on northern Idaho and what it has done to that culture there and those ranchers, and what it is. Even if you don't need the deer and the elk for fuel management, just out of nature's way, look what it did just in the slaughter of those. This is a Canadian wolf that kills to kill. The Native American wolves, which we have no, as far as I know, endangered species, gone. We don't have any more of those. They killed what they needed. When the Canadian wolf is in Canada, it kills what it needs because it's 20 degrees cooler there. They just eat what they need, and then they hover down and survive. They get in these warm climates, they just become ruthless. And that's what I'm concerned about for our farmers and ranchers.
The other thing I was going to say is there was a family, a group that went up through the burn area from this past year. And there was snow up in there, and they just went up and they're walking for the day to see what they saw. And of the whole family walking for the entire day, they saw 6 deer tracks is all they saw. Yeah. So, have we been decimated? I can assure you we have.
We've got history
right
right
so
before
would you like
us.
to have a motion on this, sir?
Well, I like the idea of going with a letter first to the ODA to see if we can have the joint committee. I think that's the best approach for right now, Mr. Chair, in my opinion.
Do I have a second?
So your motion is that we send a letter to the Farm Bureau?
A letter to the Department of Agriculture to see if we can have a joint advisory council with
Okay,
those counties.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
One quick question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
The ODA gets their money on this project or program from the federal government on the U.S. Fish and Game, I think. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next we have C, 7C, Proposed Real Property Sales Program. Ms. Schmelzer,
Okay, what I am proposing...
you have your mic on? Oh, okay.
Yes, I do. What I'm proposing to you today is something I've seen work elsewhere. Basically, it's a formula whereby when we have county-owned properties, we can transfer them to our Parks Department. And once transferred to our Parks Department, we can then sell those lands, and the money, the proceeds from those sales go into the parks budget, so they can help with maintain existing parks or expand the park system. So it's a three-step process that you basically start with. One is you would identify properties that would need to be sold, and I gave you an example of that order. And then following that, we'd have an order that would then relay the properties to the park, and then another order that would actually allow them to be sold at a sheriff's sale. If those properties sell, then they go into the Parks Fund. What it does is it allows the county to retain all the proceeds from the sale versus a smaller percentage if we would just sell them outright.
Question. Do they have to be sold at a sheriff's sale, or can they be advertised and sold through a realtor?
I believe it says a sheriff's sale. It has to be, notice of the hearing shall be given by publication weekly for 2 consecutive weeks, etc., when you're selling it. So...
That's not necessarily a sheriff's sale, though a realtor could.
Yeah, I don't know, does, Shayla might have a...
I'm not sure. Normally it would be a sheriff's sale.
Okay.
Let me just tell you what happened on one of our properties that we sold. First of all, they had the sheriff's thing. It did not go through because it didn't meet the minimum standards. Then we put it through a realtor after that. But I think it has to go through the sheriff's sale first.
Okay.
I know the statute requires the hearing, which tells me that's the legal process through the sheriff, but it doesn't specifically say sheriff.
Can we have counsel look at that and find out exactly?
Yep.
Thank you. So I think, can we just plan this for the next meeting, and then we can get advice from counsel on that?
Sure. So the purpose of bringing it forward today is to just let you be aware of this. If it's something you support, looking further into, we can wait for legal to give us that information about the sheriff's sale, and then in the meantime, too, we could formulate a list of properties that might be eligible for consideration.
I think you know my answer to that one.
I think it's safe to say she has a consensus.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just kind of looking long-term. Okay, so now the properties go, or the monies go into the park department. That will give us the ability to reinvigorate our parks and make them so that more tourists could go there, therefore more money come in.
That's absolutely right.
Is that the long-term goal? Okay.
Yes. And it will expand the budget for the parks, and there's a lot we could do, I think. There's a lot we could do in the parks. All right, do I have a motion?
I'll move that we move ahead with this program that Ms. Schmelzer has put forth.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, further discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes?
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Carried unanimously.
All righty. 7D, initiate proceedings to vacate alley at Pacific City, and Council Huddle is not here. Did he fill you in on this one?
Yes, he did, Chair. If I may, a petition has been filed by Mr. Bulldog in regards to an alley vacation at Pacific City, which is actually out by Flores Lake, I believe. And this is the first step in the process. It's a direction from you to your roadmaster to prepare the report he's required to do, which is essentially whether or not it's in the public's interest to have this alley vacation, and to notify the abutting property owners, and to set it for a further hearing on May 22nd.
Do I have a motion?
So I just have one question. Well, I'll put the motion forth that we do it for discussion.
Okay.
That we accept what is it? The vacation of the alley.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Discussion?
Okay, my question is, what would be the county's, why would we want to do this? What would we gain from doing this?
That's something that you would consider at your hearing, because you will have a further hearing on this to actually make the decision. And frankly, it will depend on what your roadmaster brings forward as in what's in the best interest of the county. those neighboring properties.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, so we're going to, the motion is to have the roadmaster move forward with a report.
Yes, you have, I believe you have a resolution in your packet.
Let's see.
And it doesn't have a number, does it?
Let's see that one. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. Oh, okay, so the motion is to move forward with a resolution in the packet. Is that correct? And do I have a second? We had a second from Commissioner Boyce. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Moving on to number 8, Director's Report. Ms. Schmelzer.
Okay, just a few things for you. One is we do need to appoint a compensation board, so we have put out a notice in the paper seeking members for compensation committee.
What's the ending date on that?
JJ, do you remember the ending date on the compensation committee ad?
The 14th of March or the 21st of March.
And then that compensation committee looks at salaries for elected officials and makes a recommendation on what those should be. They look at such things as comparing those positions as if they were in the private sector as well, to try and come up with the budget committee. Still working on the travel policy. We'll leave it at that. We did run an ad for a building official. We still do not have a building official. Just last I checked, we haven't even had any applications for it. So I think we're going to have to look at some alternatives, such as privatized inspection services or something to that effect, or continue with the way things are, although that is costing us quite a bit of money. So it's something we are hoping we get somebody to apply for.
Didn't we have someone that we looked at maybe joining services with another county on that and sharing that?
Yes, I am having a discussion with another county on whether or not we can share those services and how that would work. Preference would be to have somebody actually apply and have somebody in-house that's here 5 days a week.
Oh, I agree, but I'm saying it would be cheaper to share it with somebody right now than the way we're currently doing it, I think. So until we could get that full-time position filled in-house, at least that might be an alternative.
It's an alternative to continue pursuing. So, we did have an email asking the board to do liaison reports. I did reach out to some of you individually, and I think the feeling was that the liaison reports can be done under commissioner updates, and then the fact that we're doing quarterly reports now from each department will satisfy that as well, to keep the public and the board updated on what's going on. At our workshop with the on the fire issues, Merv George had recommended to us that if we wanted to do anything to help with the fire issue, we could start bringing more people into the fire program. So economic development has started to work on a type of program that could possibly help bring more people, students, into interest with the fire services, and actually perhaps look at having a school here or something to that effect. We did hear from CCH about their difficulty in retaining employees because of the housing issue. Economic development does plan on having a housing presentation coming up next month. She's also looking at some of our numbers to determine whether or not there is a need for an emergency housing declaration in the county. Code enforcement, real quick, he's been really busy. He has 51 active open cases right now, and 43 of them that he has closed. The majority of them are in South County. 55 are in South County, 25 were in Central, 11 in North County, and 3 of them are in East County. So, and he's part-time, so that's a lot of work. He's doing really good. And then lastly, just a notice that DLCD is requiring the planning department, and Becky is here in case there's any questions on this, to send out a notice to all the people that own EFU or other ag zones, a notice that they can no longer have, that DLCD is proposing a rule that they would no longer be allowed to have commercial solar panels on their property unless there is a crop or something underneath the solar panel. So we're required to send the notice out. Becky has actually went through and created the notice.
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. This is how it reads. Summary of the proposed amendments. The proposed rule amendments change the criteria for approving a photovoltaic solar power generating facility in EFU and AFD zones. If the Land and Conservation Development Commission enacts the rule, Curry County would no longer be permitted to approve a solar power generating facility on property zoned EFU or AFD that has soils rated by NRCS as Class 1, 2, prime, or unique.
So California mandates that you put solar on your homes, and Oregon says pull them off.
Well,
I thought you might have a comment, Ms. Crockett.
I would think they'd be grandfathered in if they're already there.
Oregon actually mandates that you have to have, in most cases, provision when you're building a house to be able to hook up to solar, but this is for commercial.
Right, I understand.
So,
And it's
Yeah.
probably for other reasons, I guess.
Well, it's to prohibit large solar farms on prime farmland.
Oh.
Essentially what it does is it precludes that from happening up in the Willamette Valley.
Now I'm understanding. All right.
Thanks, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you. Okay.
there are some creative ways around it. I am familiar with one of them. I was explaining to Ms. Crockett. There's one in the Willamette Valley where what they actually did is they put they're doing apiary underneath it, so they have beehives under it, so they can say that they're using that farmland for farming purposes. And then above it are the panels. But yes, it's something, and she inventoried it would affect, the rule if it changed would affect about 100 properties that are in those zoning districts.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner updates, Commissioner Boyce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, just a prepared statement here on the Wiley lawsuit to the Curry citizens and all I represent. Twice in the past few months, I've been testing the crucible of the Curry County and state court system, and twice I've come out victorious. I'm placing into the record a copy of the most recent circuit court judgment that vindicates me on the latest charges moving forward. Thank you. Would you pass those around for me? Sudden Oak death. We have a new representative, co-convener with David Brock Smith that replaces Senator Merkley. Her name is Kathy McEwen. She's a Coos County state representative. Has been there, I think this is her 4th term. I think an effective legislator. We're glad to have her on board. Her and Representative David Brock Smith, I think I have a copy here. Nope, not there. Becky, is that Mouser by chance? It's the one with turquoise. Anyway, the 8, thank you very much. The 8 coastal representatives through the Oregon Coastal Caucus have asked the governor for a sudden oak death. I won't read you the letter, but for an emergency declaration to stop this dreaded disease. Let's see if I can figure out which one it is.
Is it one that says emergency request, the PDF? Second from the bottom.
Right there.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, guys. This letter went out from 8 different senators, well, I think 3 senators and 2 or 5 state representatives. Well, here they are on the left, I'm sorry, including our Senator Dallas Hurd. It's basically asking for $30 million that would come into Curry County to stop as much as we possibly can the European strain, which is, you know, is affecting our evergreens. We don't know what the consequences of that are going to be yet. They've all but decided to not make the original NA1 strain that big of a to really try and stop that. Although that is possible now with this kind of funding. Oregon State University has been very much involved. The BLM has been very helpful. Certainly the Forest Service has been. It is still contained in Curry County. The general infected area, GIA area, is 89 square miles. It's mostly in the Brookings area. And earlier today, the very beginning of our meeting when we talked about the Oregonian article, yeah, I challenge any city in Oregon that has been hit as hard as Brookings has been hit in the last 10 years. Maybe even a little bit longer when you add the sinkhole, the tsunami that really affected the port. They suffered more from the Checo Bar fire, etc. And now somehow Gorse moving from North Curry County is somehow miraculously leapfrogged over Central Curry County, is also in Brookings, and so they're struggling to get to deal with that. You heard some of the testimony today in the Curry Florist Forest of 500 acres. You know, it gets in there, and any place it can get sun, of course, expands and is quite prolific. So anyway, we're hoping that the governor will sign this emergency. I'm lobbying David Brock Smith and his associates there to include, if at all possible, a separate county emergency declaration for Curry County to go in with SOD and to help us with the highway and get funds. I know you worked very hard on that when you went back to DC. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I can sure have that available. And real quick, back to the highway, I want to just, we've got reason to smile here. That's what the highway looked like one day after. This is not your picture, by the way, although you took some good ones. You can see that it slid down almost 90 feet in a block like that. And so I just want to offer the public this is Jane Stebbins was there taking pictures. Was this your picture, by the way? I think this is OD. I can't remember. But this is a big time. We were here hooping and hollering like kids in a football game because these were the first cars coming to exactly 13 and a half days later. Somehow, and the interesting thing was there was the first 8 cars, only 1 or 2 of them were from Oregon. It was Florida, Texas, Washington, British Columbia. So it was just kind of a special day. It was a beautiful day. And then Jane and I and a friend of ours hiked up here, and we had access to look down, and I'll spare you pictures on that. But it was just a great day for Curry County, and I sent out a ton of these all over to friends in Oregon, just say, hey, we got 1 lane, we're working on 2, we're going to get this done, and I've had a lot of good comments. Did I say a half hour? Don't you start. I just mentioned BLM will go helping greatly with SOD, and AOC counties has been with this in the very beginning since Merkley and David Brock Smith started the task force, and they've just facilitated this whole thing. Mark Labhart, I had a highway meeting in Coquille on Friday, so I was kind of going back and forth between that meeting and the task force meeting. It's really the only task force meeting I've missed in almost 2 years because I think it is so important. But the BLM, on their contracts with the Oregon Department of Forestry, they are getting harder and harder to deal with, and it is such an important part of the firefighting budget for the state of Oregon and Oregon Department of Forestry as it comes down to our forest protective associations all over the state. And the BLM is basically, and this is a big issue for especially our area, Southwest Oregon. They are only wanting to do their contracts 1 week at a time, or excuse me, 1 year at a time. I'm sorry, and they still haven't signed for 2019, and here we get 2 or 3 months from fire season. So. I'm going to be asking the board to come up with a letter. Our representative at the Coos Bay BLM district is Kathy Westenhow, and we just need to reach out to every BLM person we know in the state and Forest Service, but primarily BLM. Forest Service does their own firefighting, but Oregon needs this money, even though their record in firefighting is incredible. And you've heard the stat before, but they keep 90% of them under 10 acres. And some of these people, I just heard from one of them from Hillsborough, who was down here a year ago, and they're just the greatest people, and just a real honor to know them. I've got a couple bills here. Actually, I want to do a couple side notes real quick, but you know, I don't agree with David Brock Smith on everything, but I'll tell you, if I can find that one now. I don't see it. Huh. He made the front cover of, I don't know what happened, JJ. Anyway, he made the front cover of Ruralite magazine, which is all the cooperatives in the state, and it was working with another legislator. Am I missing it, JJ?
It's probably one of those PDFs.
I saw it. Just
anyway, I'd like the public to see it because he is got a tremendous talent for reaching across the aisle, and he's working with one new representative by the name of Powers, and she's from the metropolitan area of Portland. And anyway, it's a very nice article, and he's just been very effective, and I just want to give him a shout out. I joke with him a little bit and say it's the best county commissioner we've ever had, except for my grandfather in the 30s and 40s. So moving along here. One bill that he is actually the co-sponsor of, I need to research this a little bit, but I'm going to put the number out there for the public. House Bill 3360 provides that bonds may be used under a certain article of the Oregon Constitution if the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court determines that remodeling, renovation, or expansion of court facilities is necessary, or desirable. That is not out of committee yet, but we got a little bit of optimism that provides that bonds may be used. And just reading the highlight portions here, courthouse improvement bonds, and then it gives some exceptions that it can't be used for. The court has determined, if the Justice has determined the remodeling, renovation, expansion of the court facilities with respect to which the bonds will be issued is I'm repeating myself on that, but I'm going to be keeping a real close eye on that, giving Representative Brock Smith as much support as we can there, especially with our courthouse. Increase House Bill 2449. This is through public safety. Increases the amount of distribution from emergency communications account to counties with populations under 400,000, relating to tax for emergency communications, amends one other law, and providing for revenue raising that requires approval by a 3/5 majority. So we have that supermajority now in both the House and the Senate. So I might be able to give a more extensive report on that later on. Another meeting, and let's see. I think those are the two primary bills that. And when I went to AOC, 2 days there was a ton of bills. And then maybe today's not the best day, but we really need to educate ourselves on the cap and trade bill, the carbon reduction, how that could affect rural Oregon, especially Curry County, transportation costs, how it'll impact our farmers, and not just Curry County, but at Coos, our region here. And so, food costs are going to go up, transportation goes up, you know the rest. Gasoline will probably go up by about 16 cents a gallon. They're making an early prediction right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Commissioner Gold.
I'll make this short. I've been in pretty extensive discussions with our code enforcement officer. I am his liaison, and I think he's doing a terrific job compared to what we had, nothing before. Recently, he's gotten people to take 5 RVs off the road, so we didn't have to pay for them, plus 2 vehicles, thus saving the county $4,550, which I thought was great. And he told me about several sites, 3 in the county that we know of, that have multiple RVs sitting on them with sewage coming out. And the one he told me about, the guy is charging these people $600 a month and has a gun and won't let him come on. So we need to get kind of a team to go in there, maybe with the sheriff and so forth, in order to get things going. But I think what's happening is people are seeing that we are doing something, therefore they are complying. He's also going to be getting something on our website, so getting forms for code enforcement is much easier to access. So, quite frankly, I'm pretty darn happy with what he's doing with the amount of time that he has. That's it.
And there's a case that I think even I've spoken with our tax assessor about, offering people, to come in now and get your properties fully coded and up to speed. And get them on the proper tax rolls, an amnesty program, those kind of things really work in a lot of counties.
Can I say one more thing on this?
Sure.
He was talking about working with fire departments, the districts, because they go out and see some of these properties, and kind of working together to make sure that we get these things taken care of.
And this is another thing, like you said, the gentleman had a gun. He spoke with me about this just in passing the other day, not formally, but he was just talking about, you know, how he saw that, and that's something that he needs to coordinate with our sheriff's department.
That's what I told
Send a
him.
deputy with him. These are things that code enforcement officials face. That's why they need radios in their trucks to call for backup when they've been threatened or are very, very insecure about where they're going to go. My comments for today are going to be a little bit more than normal, but I'm going to try and keep it brief. Spent 6 days in Washington, D.C. Learned a lot about Washington, D.C., holy moly. But had some great times and talks with all of our representatives from the state. Congressman DeFazio actually took time for 2 meetings with us. And of course, I'm going to forget people's names. His right-hand girl is PK, I think is what they call her, or KP. Chris Pratt sat there and literally, after we were all done with him, sat there for another hour with us. People that I think are genuinely concerned about rural Oregon, some of the things that we're doing, and some of the shortcomings that we have here. Edward McGlone is another a representative for Mr. DeFazio. Met with Senator Wyden's people. He actually came out and talked with us as well for about 15 or 20 minutes. Merkley's people, I did not meet personally with Merkley. I was actually really under the weather that night and did not go. Even though Mr. Walden was here for Dennis Richardson's funeral, his entire staff met with us and spent, again, about an hour and a half with us. The new word in Washington is no longer earmarks, it is Title I. We are being, I don't want to say promised, but we are high on the list for some Title I money to help deal with some of the issues we're facing in Curry County. We are also going to be looking at some federal disaster on the highway system here and some additional funding for that. That Mr. DeFazio, who is now the head of the Transportation Committee, can hopefully help push some of that through for rural Oregon. I did leave there thinking that there is a sense that people realize the shortcomings that we have here, and they realize that they're not going to get fixed without some of Washington's help. There were some great relationships started there. I think this thing coming up with the census, like I spoke about earlier, is imperative for Curry County and rural Oregon to get a proper voice, to join this app that's that you put on your telephone. It not only gives, again, it not only gives the Census Bureau who's where, when, but it also, for broadband services, it will greatly improve that for rural Oregon. PILT money, Senator Wyden has been a large voice in that for a long time. He's now going to be the senior on that committee, and he is looking to do that and SRS money in perpetuity for rural Oregon. He believes he can have that done by October, with no promises, but his personal words to us were that if he can get, and I don't, forgive me, I don't remember the Republicans.
Crapo.
Crapo, yeah. And he's on the treasurer or the finance side of it. They are working together jointly, and they've almost got enough votes right now to push it through, and he thinks by October they can actually put that through, which would, it would basically call, it would make basically a trust. So this money would be there every year for rural Oregon. So that's something really exciting. I'm sure there's a lot I'm forgetting about right now that that happened there. Some of the relationships that we made there, though, I think are going to be long and lasting. I'm going to actually get a lot of these people on my weekly calling lists and email lists just to say hello and keep rural Oregon in front of them. I am going to be looking to a couple of committees there. One is really important for me. I am going to have a presidential appointment to the Veterans Committee for NACO, which is a nationwide organization. They asked me if I would be willing to do it. I'm one of the only commissioners in rural counties nationwide to join that. And they said I would be accepted under the presidential appointment, so I told them I would be thrilled to do it. And hopefully I will get that committee appointment in June. Until then, I'm
I'd write you a letter of support,
almost
but
appointed.
it may doom you.
But anyway,
well, that is great
I'm
news.
excited for that. Anything to do with our veterans, mental health, homeless veterans, anything we can do to improve the lives and liberties of this country, our veterans and their families, I will do to my last breath. I'm actually going to be looking to Julie and this commission over the coming months to start something that I think is a little out of the box, but try and find some housing for homeless veterans here in our county, using some of our land that it sits dormant, and letting veterans, along with maybe some builders in the county, work together to form some kind of housing and shelter for some of our less fortunate veterans that have been overlooked here in the last few years. So, always near and dear to my heart. With that, I will say those are the closing comments. Anyone have anything further?
I just have one question on the Title I money. Were there strings attached to that?
Are there strings attached to earmarks?
That's what I'm asking.
I do have one comment on that.
Yes.
The endowment. You said a trust?
Endowment,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, same thing. There's three ways that the rural counties can get money. One is just outright, as in PILT or SRS, and then they can do a grant. And then the third one is a loan. You can actually loan from that fund. It's going to have $7 billion in it.
Yes.
I don't know how many states that, I think it's the 14 western states, but I don't have that real clear, but great work.
Another thing for the public that just while you were saying that hit me is there is 400, we met with Ben Carson, head of HUD. There is $400 million right now set aside for SBA loans for rural counties nationwide. $400 million. So anyone looking to possibly open a small business up, expand a small business, renovate your small business, that it all makes sense. Maybe some Californians that are tired of paying a 20% double dip on the taxes would like to come up to Curry County and open a small business. SBA is giving those kind of loans. There are also a lot of grants that are available to businesses, startup businesses that are looking to hire veterans and people that have been in jail or in jeopardy that way. There are some grants for that as well. So just things that we can continue to look in on, and I will stop there. Thank you. This meeting is, we're going to go to executive session. That's right. We have to go to executive session at this time. So, workshop, well, executive session shouldn't be too long. We're going to have to delay the workshop probably 15 or 20 minutes. So, I need to read the executive session reason. Executive session ORS 192-660 to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection per ORS 192-345. Records for information that would reveal or otherwise identify security measures or weaknesses or potential weaknesses in security measures taken or recommended to be taken to protect buildings or other property. So we are going to recess this meeting, enter executive session, and then we will be back immediately after executive session. That was a mouthful.
I think you probably needed to say there were no decisions made.
Oh, no, wait a minute. We need to come back in for your thing. I'm sorry. No, you know what? We're going to come back in. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. We're going to come back into session.
It's quite all right.
Commissioner Boyce, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought that was clearly listed on executive session, but this is better, and I do apologize for having that a bit confused, Mr. Chair and Board. The Southwest Oregon region, the governor has wisely put together Wildfire Response Council, and as of this writing, that could have changed the last day or so, no one has been appointed from our 6-county region, 5-county region to that council. And of course, we're the most susceptible to mega fire, nuclear fire, catastrophic fire, whatever term you prefer. And you know, it's a nice day out there, and it kind of makes you think, okay, how soon, how quickly things going to dry out. I was quoted in the Oregonian that I wanted it to rain 2 inches every day till the end of May, and that was 2 inches a week, but that was okay. To extend fire season into June and maybe not even have that. So with the 3 major fires we've had in Curry County in the last 18 months, again, 2 of them mega fires, all the acres we've lost. There are subcommittees, and I'm working with Josephine County Commissioner Lily Morgan and Jackson County Commissioner Colleen Roberts. They're telling me to take the lead. There's 3 different subcommittees, and they're certainly as capable as I. But they are supporting me in hopefully being the Southwest Oregon representative to this council, and I think it's very important. I think the governor's taken a wise approach, but certainly I believe I could contribute a lot to this, and Curry County greatly needs to be represented at the state level. And that goes beyond just my work at the Oregon Department of Forestry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So do you have a motion?
I don't want to make a motion to nominate myself or to get the support of the board for this council. And there's nothing to say that I will be chosen, but I would like a letter of support.
Okay.
And
I'll direct staff to make a letter of support, and I'll sign it as board chair. Or do you want all 3 commissioners to sign it?
Oh, I want anyone and everyone's support.
All right, so why don't we do that? Well, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we are in recess. Now, if you can give me 3 minutes, we're going to get a workshop going, right? He needs a couple minutes to reset everything there. Sneak out here a little quick.